Samuel Ashcroft kicked the front door open, the divorce papers crushed in his fist, the cruelest words of his life already loaded on his tongue. "Sign them, Abigail. We're done." Then she turned from the window. Her shawl slipped, and every word he'd rehearsed for 100 miles died in his throat. His wife stood swollen with child, 7 months gone, alone, abandoned carrying a baby he never knew existed. The pen fell from his hand and rolled across the floor between them. If this story moves you, subscribe and follow it to the very end. And tell me in the comments which city you're watching from, so I can see how far this story has traveled. The stable boy got to the gate before Samuel did. "You'd be Mr. Ashcroft." The boy couldn't have been 15. He looked up at the rider with no fear in him, and no welcome either. "Reckon I know the face. There's a portrait in the hall you ain't burned yet." "Take the horse. I'll take him." The boy didn't move. "Miss Abigail know you're comin'." "No?" "Didn't reckon so." He spat to the side. "Folks around here'd have warned her." Samuel swung down. "And why's that? 'Cause folks around here like her." The boy took the reins. "And nobody much likes the man what left her." Samuel let that land and walked on. He'd ridden 7 months and 100 miles to be hated, and the hate had come early, and that was fine. It would make the rest easier. A man did the hard thing better when he knew he deserved no thanks for it. He climbed the steps. He had a key in his pocket. He'd carried it across half the country, but he knocked. The man who lived in this house had a key. He wasn't sure anymore that he was that man. Eleanor Briggs opened the door, and the color went out of her face. "Mr. Ashcroft." "Mrs. Briggs." "We weren't told." 65 years old and built like a fence rail, the old woman planted herself square in the doorway. She did not step aside. In 2 years she had never once failed at a courtesy, and Samuel marked it. "What is it you've come for?" "My wife." "Your wife." She said it like there was a stone caught in it. "After 7 months." "After 7 months." "She's not well." "What's wrong with her?" "That ain't mine to say." "Then whose is it?" "Hers." The old woman's jaw set hard. "And if you've got a thimble of the decency your name's supposed to carry, you'll let her be the one that says it. You don't come back into a house you walked out of and start asking questions like you got a right to the answers." "I'm coming in, Mrs. Briggs." "I figured you would." She still didn't move. "I just wanted to look at you first. Wanted to see what kind of man rides off and leaves a girl to—" She stopped herself, pressed her lips white. "Never mind what. You'll see soon enough. God forgive me for opening this door." From inside the house, a voice, steadier than the old woman's. "Eleanor, let him in." Eleanor stepped back. As Samuel passed her, she caught his sleeve just for a second and spoke low and fast, and only for him. "You be gentle with her, or so help me, I'll put something in your supper. They won't be able to name at the inquest." He didn't answer. He walked down the hall toward the parlor, and his boots were loud, and his own heart was louder. She stood at the window with her back half to him, wrapped throat to wrist, in a heavy wool shawl in the hottest July anyone could remember. "Abigail." She turned, thinner in the face, paler, shadows under her eyes that hadn't been there in December. But she stood the way she always stood, chin level, shoulders square the way her dead father had stood, and she looked at him with a calm that cut the legs out from under every word he'd practiced. "You've come a long way," she said. "I have. There's coffee, or my father's whiskey if you'd rather. I haven't touched it." "I don't need anything." "No," she said. "You never did." He made himself say it before the calm of her could unman him. "Abigail, you know why I'm here." "I expect I do." "I've brought papers." "Of course you have. Articles of separation, drawn proper by Pierce. They're fairer than you'd guess. The estate stays yours, that was never in question. There's a settlement besides. You'd want for nothing. You could live out your life here free of—" He stopped. "Free of you," she said. "Free of a marriage that's brought us nothing but grief." She looked at him a long moment. "Is that what it's brought us? Grief. We've buried more than most folks bury in a lifetime, and we did it without one kind word worth saying. You cried alone in this house, and I drank alone in mine. A marriage isn't two people mourning separately under the same roof." His voice climbed, and he hauled it down. "I came to set you free, Abigail. That's the whole of it. Letting you go was the only decent thing left in me. How noble." The first edge came into her voice, then turned away again like a blade caught in the light. "To ride 7 months too late to set me free. 7 months too. You wrote me 4 letters. She said it quiet, which was worse than loud. 4. In 7 months. I kept them. I read them till the creases wore through. And not once, Samuel, did you ask how I was living. You told me about the harbor, the price of cotton, the fog. You never asked how I was." "Abigail, you didn't ask because you'd already decided. You decided I'd be better without you. Then you lined up your facts to prove it the way you line up everything. Cold. From a distance. And now you've ridden all this way to hand me the proof in writing." She drew a breath. "Sit down. You've come far to do a hard thing. Sit while you do it." He didn't sit. He couldn't have said why. He stood there with the folded papers turned suddenly to lead inside his coat, and he looked at the shawl, and the thing that had been nagging at him since the doorway came up to the front of his mind. July. The hottest July in memory, and his wife wrapped to the throat in winter wool. "Abigail, why are you cold?" Her hands moved beneath the shawl, drawing it tighter. "I'm not cold." "Then why?" "Sit down, Samuel." "Take off the shawl." "No. Mrs. Briggs said you weren't well and wouldn't say what. If you're sick, I've a right to—" "You have no rights in this house." It came out fast, the calm splintering, and she caught it and pressed her lips and got it back. "You signed them away. They're in your coat. You can't claim a right and surrender it in the same hour. I'm claiming nothing." He was close now, close enough to see the damp at her hairline that wasn't from heat, close enough to see that her stillness wasn't calm at all, but a woman holding up a wall with her bare hands. "Please, take off the shawl." "Don't. Take it off." She turned fast, turned to put the window at her back, to put her body away from him, and the heavy wool caught on the corner of her father's reading chair and slid. Off her shoulder, down her arm, onto the floor, and Samuel Ashcroft looked at his wife, and the whole world tipped sideways. She was carrying a child. Far gone with it, the high round swell of her unmistakable now under the thin summer dress the shawl had hidden, and her hands came up too late to cover what couldn't be covered, and her eyes came to his, and there was nothing calm left in them at all. The pen he'd been holding to give her dropped from his fingers and rolled across the floorboards and stopped against the leg of the settee. He didn't speak. He had 100 words, and not one would come. "Now you know," Abigail said. His mouth opened. "You came for my signature." Her voice shook, and she let it. "Instead, you found your child." "Abigail," a whisper. How far?" "Do the arithmetic. You're so good at arithmetic." She bent awkward, one hand braced at the small of her back, and gathered the fallen shawl, and didn't put it on. She held it crushed to her chest and faced him. "You left in December. It's July. Count. That's 7. It's 7 months. Then it's—" He stopped. He couldn't say it. "Then it's mine." It was the worst thing he could have said, and he knew it the instant it left him. She looked at him like he'd struck her. Her chin came up. Her voice dropped low and level and terrible. "Get out. Abigail, you stand in my father's parlor. You look at a woman carrying a child she's carried alone 7 months alone in this house, with nobody but Eleanor and God, and the first thing your accountant's heart can find is to wonder whose it is." She was crying now openly, not wiping it, not hiding it because she'd run clean out of room to hide anything. "Get out of my house. Go back to Boston. Take your papers. I'll sign them. I'll sign every page, but I will not stand here and be asked by my own husband whose child I'm carrying. I didn't mean—" He'd moved without knowing it, hand out, and she stepped back from it like it was a hot stove. "I didn't mean it that way. I was God. I'm a fool, I didn't know. You have to understand. I didn't know." "You didn't know." she said, because you didn't ask. There it was again, the whole of it in 5 words, and it hit him with the full weight of 7 months, and he had no answer because she was right. Sit, she said flat. Now the fury burned down to ash. You wanted to. Sit. You're white as the wall, and I won't have you fainting and giving Eleanor one more thing to scrub. He sat in her father's chair. He put his hands over his face. His child was alive inside the woman he'd come to leave. He had not known. He had not known because he had not asked, and he was going to have to live inside that for the rest of his days. When he took his hands down, she'd lowered herself onto the settee across from him, slow, her breath catching at the effort. The fierceness had drained out of her. What was left was tiredness, an ocean of it. How far along? He said. Near 7 months. Dr. Pratt says the end of August. Could be sooner. A pause. He says I'm not as strong through it as he'd like. Pratt's been seeing you. Every fortnight. Eleanor drives me in. He doesn't charge what he ought. He knew my father. She looked at her hands. Everyone here knew my father. They're kind to me in town. They think you abandoned me. She looked up steady. I never told them different. I let them think it. I'm not proud of it, but I won't lie to you about it. It's true enough, he said. I did abandon you. You left. There's a difference, though. I couldn't have told you what it was this morning. A man leaves for 100 reasons. Abandonment's when he decides you're better off for it and never once asks what you'd choose. I thought I was sparing you. From what? From me. He stood. He couldn't sit. He crossed to the window where she'd been and put his hand flat on the warm glass. After we lost the second child, you stopped looking at me. You don't recall it that way, maybe, but you did. You'd come into a room, and your eyes would go anywhere but my face. I told myself it was grief. It was grief. But it was more, and I knew it. I thought you couldn't bear the sight of me. I thought every time you looked at me, you saw the 2 graves out behind the chapel. And I thought the most loving thing left in me was to take my face out of your sight forever. The room went quiet. That's a fine speech, Abigail said. Did you write it on the ride down? No. You should have asked me. She said it without heat, which was worse. That's all. That's the whole of it, and it's so simple a child could see it, and you never could. You should have come to me and said, Abigail, I think you can't bear to look at me. And I'd have told you the truth, that I couldn't look at you because I was ashamed. Because I'd lost 2 babies and thought it was my doing. Because I thought you blamed me. Not in words. You're far too careful for words. But I thought you looked at me and saw a wife who couldn't give you the one thing a wife's supposed to give, and I couldn't meet your eyes for fear of seeing it confirmed. Her voice shook and steadied. I wasn't turning from you because I couldn't bear you. I was turning because I couldn't bear myself. And you took my shame and decided it was loathing and packed your trunk on the strength of your own guess and went. He stood very still. I never blamed you, he said. Not once, not for one breath. I swear it before God. I half know that now. I might have known it then if either of us had ever said one honest thing out loud in this house. But we didn't. You go cold and I go proud, and between us we built a marriage you could have stored ice in. She laughed a small, wet, broken sound and pressed the back of her hand to her mouth. And then you left. And 3 weeks after I started being sick in the mornings. And Pratt told me what it was. And I had to decide whether to write you. He came back and sat and leaned toward her elbows on his knees. You decided not to. I wrote you 4 times. His head came up. 4 letters, Samuel. The morning Pratt confirmed it, I wrote the first. I told you everything. That I was frightened. That I wanted you home. That, her voice caught. That I forgave you for going, and that we'd been given one more chance, and I didn't want to waste it being proud. Eleanor carried it to the post herself, with the Tuesday mail. And I waited. No answer. I told myself the post is slow, Boston's far. So I wrote again, and again. 4 times. And not one answer, and the man I married does not leave a letter unanswered. He's 100 cold things, but he is not careless. She wiped her face hard with the heel of her hand. So I decided you'd read them. read every word and chosen silence. I decided you knew I carried your child and didn't want it and didn't want me, and that your silence was your answer. And I stopped writing. And I told this whole county you abandoned me because as far as I knew you had twice over. Samuel had gone white again. Abigail, I never had a single letter from you. Not one. After December, nothing. I thought you wanted me gone. I wrote my 4 because a man owes his wife the courtesy of knowing he still breathes. But you never answered those either, and so I decided the same thing you did. That you'd read them. That your silence was your answer. They looked at each other across the small space, and the same understanding came up in both faces. Letters don't simply vanish, Samuel. No, he said slowly. They don't. 4 of mine to Boston. 4 of yours, you say, to here. Eleanor carried mine herself, every one she'd sooner cut off her hand than fail me. Her brow drew down. Who handles your post at the house in Boston? Who takes it in sorts, it decides what reaches you. He didn't answer right away. Something moved behind his eyes, and his jaw tightened, and his hands curled slow into fists on his knees. Somebody does, he said at last, very quiet. Somebody in that house has handled every letter through my door for 30 years. Then somebody could have burned 8 of them, Abigail said, and we'd never have known they came. The silence after that was a different kind. It was 2 people seeing the shape of a thing done to them in the dark by a hand they hadn't thought to suspect. Don't, she said before he could speak. If I'd had even one of your letters. Don't, Samuel. I'd have ridden through the night. I'd have... Stop. Sharp enough to cut him off. She pressed both hands flat to the swell of her belly, breathing through something, and when she spoke again, each word came down like a stone laid in a wall. Listen to me. I am too far gone with this child to live on what would have happened. A woman in my state cannot afford, if only. It will tear her apart, and the child with her. So you will not sit in my father's chair and torture us both with letters we never got. They didn't come. That's the fact. We are where we are. And where we are is this: you came today to end our marriage, and you are about to be a father, and I do not yet know what either of those things means, and I am very tired. He held still a long moment. Then I won't speak of the letters, he said. Not now. But I'll learn the truth of it. When I go back. When you go back. The words stopped him cold. He heard in his own mouth the thing he hadn't known he was still carrying, that this was a visit that he would return to Boston and his ledgers and his quiet, murderous house, and he heard how it sounded to a woman sitting there carrying his child. I'm not going back to Boston, he said. Not without you. You said that at the altar. You said you'd never leave. She didn't raise her voice. I won't weigh a marriage on what you mean in the heat of a moment. You've meant things before. It landed exactly where she aimed. He took it. That's fair. I know it's fair. Then hear what I'm asking, and judge what it's worth, and don't take it on faith I haven't earned faith. He leaned in. I'm not asking you to forgive me, not to love me or look at me or stop being angry. You've earned your anger, and I'd think less of you if you gave it up cheap. I'm asking one thing. Let me stay. Not as your husband. As a man with a duty to you and that child who means to do it. Let me stay till it's born. Let me see you safe through. Let me make myself useful and ask nothing back. And when it's over, if you still want me gone, I'll go. I'll sign whatever you put in front of me. Estate in your name. Settlement on the child. And I'll never trouble you again. But don't make me ride back to Boston and sit in that house counting weeks till word comes whether you and the baby lived. She didn't answer right away. She looked at him a long time, and he sat under it and didn't look away, which cost him, because Samuel Ashcroft had spent his whole life looking away from what frightened him. You'll sleep in the East Room, she said finally. Off the kitchen, not upstairs. Eleanor's room is next to it, and the walls are thin, and she sleeps light, so don't get notions about a husband's rights. I won't. You'll do as Pratt says, and as I say, and as Eleanor says in that order, and her order's above yours, so don't argue, she'll win. All right. You'll tell no one in town who you are. As far as Spotswood County knows, my husband abandoned me, and I'll thank you not to embarrass me by turning up in church at my side before I've decided what we are. All right, and understand this clear." Her voice changed. It went very quiet, and the fierceness came back into it, a different kind. Now older, harder earned. "I am not letting you stay because I've gone soft. I haven't. I'm letting you stay because I am 7 months gone, and not strong, and Eleanor is 65, and the nearest doctor is an hour's drive, and a woman in my state is a fool to turn away 2 more hands in the house. That's all this is. I'd take a hired stranger on the same terms if I trusted him, and I trust you about as far as I trust Virginia weather. So don't mistake my arithmetic for my heart. My heart's not in this. My heart can't afford to be. I understand." "I don't think you do." She held his eyes. If you stay and make me lean on you, make me start to think this child will have a father and then you leave again. If you do that to me, if you do that to this baby, I will not survive it. I mean that as plain as I have ever meant anything. So before you unsaddle that horse, ask yourself honestly, the way you've never once been honest with yourself, whether you've got it in you to stay through the hard part and not just the easy. Because I have buried 2 children and my father and the better part of my faith in you, and there is not enough heart left in me to lose you twice." Samuel sat still. Then he stood and crossed to her and didn't touch her. He hadn't earned that, but he went down on one knee at her father's settee, so his face was level with hers. "I've been a coward my whole life," he said. "I dressed it up as caution and called it sparing you and called it duty, and it was none of those. It was fear. I was afraid to grieve our children out loud where you could see, so I grieved them cold and alone, and let you think I didn't care. I was afraid you despised me, so I left before you could say it. I've spent my whole life walking out of rooms 1 minute before the hard thing got said in them." He drew a breath. "I'm done with it. I don't know how to be the other kind of man, the kind that stays. I've never practiced. I'll do it badly. I'll get it wrong 50 times. But I'm going to learn it in this house with you and that child, or I'll die trying, and I will not leave another room 1 minute before the hard thing's been said in it. That's all I've got. Weigh it however you want." Abigail looked at him. She didn't take his hand. She wasn't ready, and he understood it. But after a long moment she said simply, "Get up. Your knees aren't what they were, and I'll not have you stuck down there." She raised her voice toward the hall. "Eleanor, Mr. Ashcroft will be staying. Make up the east room." Down the hall, dry as a creek bed in August. Will he now? And bring him the whiskey after all. He's had a shock and he looks it. Eleanor appeared in the doorway, drying her hands on her apron, and she fixed Samuel with a look that would have stripped paint. "East room's got a draft and a bad window and a mouse I ain't caught. Suits you fine." "It'll do," Samuel said. "It'll do," she repeated, like he'd said something rich. 2 years, she carried this place alone, well near enough alone, and the last 7 months altogether sick as a dog, half of 'em. And you'll lie in a drafty room and tell me it'll do. She shook her head. "Supper's at 7. You'll eat what's put down, and you'll thank the Lord for it, and you'll not say one word at my table to upset her, or I'll—" "Eleanor," Abigail said, "or I'll have words with you in the kitchen after." The old woman turned and went. Samuel got to his feet. He stood with his hands at his sides. This man who always knew what to do with his hands, and didn't. Then he bent and picked the heavy shawl up off the floor and shook it out, and stepped behind the settee, and very carefully, the way a man handles a thing. He's afraid of breaking, laid it back around his wife's shoulders. "You said you weren't cold," he said. "I lied. I do that with you sometimes." She drew it close. "We'll have to work on it. We'll have to work on a great many things." She didn't answer that. She turned her face to the window, and the land beyond it, her father's land going gold in the late light, and Samuel stood behind her, not knowing whether to stay in the room or leave it. Then she gasped. It was small and sharp, and her hand flew to the side of her belly, and Samuel was around the settee and on his knee again before he knew he'd moved. "What is it? Abigail, is it the baby? Is it coming? I'll get Eleanor. I'll ride for Pratt. Sit down." She was breathing careful. Then slowly, the lines of her face eased. It's not coming. It's not he kicks. That's all. He kicks hard of an evening always has. You frightened him with all your speeches. She let out a breath that was almost a laugh. Lord, your face. Samuel knelt there with his heart going like a hammer. He. Pratt thinks a boy. From how I carry, he's wrong as often as he's right, but he thinks a boy. May I? Samuel stopped, started again. Would you let me? She looked at him a long moment. Whatever she saw, she decided something. Without a word, she took his hand the first time she'd touched him willingly since December, and she laid it flat on the side of her belly over the spot and held it there. They waited. The kick came against his palm, sudden and strong and alive, and Samuel Ashcroft made a sound he had never made in his life, low in his chest, half a word and half a sob, and his eyes filled and spilled before he could stop them. There, Abigail said quietly, watching his face. Now you've felt him. So you can't pretend when you're tempted to leave again that he was only ever a number on Pratt's calendar. You've felt him kick. Remember it. I'll remember it. See that you do. She took his hand off her belly gently and set it back on his own knee, and the brief warmth of the moment closed over like water over a stone. Now go wash. You smell of horse and road. Eleanor will show you the room. He rose. At the door, he stopped and turned back. Abigail. The man in town, the boy at the gate, said folks here don't care for me. Has anyone troubled you while I was gone? About money, about the estate? Something flickered across her face. She covered it fast, but he caught it. Why do you ask that? Because Pierce mentioned before I left Boston that there were notes against the property. Old debts of your father's. He said a man had been inquiring after them. What man? He didn't have the name, a speculator. Buys up the paper on struggling estates, then calls the whole sum due at once when the family's weak and can't pay, and takes the land for pennies. He watched her. Has anyone been here, Abigail, asking after your father's debts? She was quiet a moment too long. A man came in May, she said, polite, well-dressed. He asked a great many questions about the harvest and the hands, and whether my husband meant to return. She lifted her chin. I told him my husband's whereabouts were no concern of his and showed him the door. He left a card. He said he'd call again at a more convenient time. Did you keep the card? Eleanor put it in the kitchen drawer. I didn't look at it twice. Her eyes narrowed. Samuel, what are you thinking? I'm thinking, he said slowly, that a man who'd been told this house was abandoned by its master, a house with a sick woman and an old servant in it, and debts hanging over the land might think it ripe. Might be patient. Might wait for it to fall a little further before he closed his hand. Abigail's jaw set. For the first time she looked less afraid than angry, and the anger steadied her. This is my father's land. He broke his back on it 40 years. He died on it. He gave it to me to keep, not to lose to some Boston vulture in a good coat. Then we'll keep it. I came here to give it to you in the divorce, Samuel said. Free and clear. I meant to clear the notes myself and sign the whole estate over and walk away. I can still do that part whatever else happens between us. The land will be yours, Abigail, and yours alone, and no man living will take it from you while I've a dollar to my name. He paused. That much I can do without your forgiveness. That much is just arithmetic. And God help me, arithmetic is the one thing I've never gotten wrong. She looked at him and something in her face shifted. Not warmth, not yet, but the smallest loosening, the way a fist eases when it's held clenched too long. Go wash, she said again, softer. We'll talk about the card after supper. Bring your ledger sense to the table. It seems we'll have a use for it after all. He went. She sat alone in the parlor as the light went, and did not call for a candle. She put both hands on the swell of her belly and felt the child turn under them, slow, now settling toward sleep. Down the hall, she could hear Eleanor laying the table, and the scrape of a chair, and the low, strange sound of a man's voice in a house that had held no man's voice in 7 months. Well, she said softly to no one, to the child, to the gold going out of the window. He came back. I didn't think he would. I told myself 100 times he wouldn't. Her hand moved on her belly. Don't you go getting attached to the sound of him. Not yet. Your mother's tried that once already, and it cost her dear, and she hasn't decided yet whether she's fool enough to try it twice. The child kicked once light against her palm. Abigail Harper closed her eyes and held her own belly in the dark, and let herself want just a little. Just for a moment. No more than she could afford the thing she had sworn all summer she would never want again. The card came out of the kitchen drawer after supper, and Samuel read the name on it twice before he set it down on the table between them. Cornelius Vane, he said. Boston and Richmond. Land agent. You know him. I know the name. Pierce mentioned it once the way a man mentions a dog that bites. He turned the card over. There was nothing on the back. He doesn't farm, and he doesn't build. He waits. He finds a piece of land with a weak hand holding it, and he buys up every debt against it quiet from a dozen different lenders till he holds the whole note. Then he calls it due, all at once. And when the family can't pay, he takes the land at the courthouse steps for 1/10 of what it's worth. Abigail sat very straight. How much does my father owe? I don't know yet. That's the first thing I'll find out. How much, Samuel? Don't manage me. I've had a belly full of being managed. He looked at her and decided she was right and gave it to her plain. When your father died, Pierce put the debt near $4,000, spread across 3 lenders in Richmond. I cleared one of them myself the spring we married. You didn't know that, and I didn't tell you because your father asked me not to. He didn't want you to know how close it had come. Her face didn't move, but her hands found each other in her lap and held on. So I owe you, she said. You don't owe me anything. $4,000 in a debt my father carried to his grave, and you cleared part of it and never said. That sounds like owing to me. It sounds like a husband doing what a husband does, Samuel said. Don't make it a ledger entry, Abigail. Not that one. You're the ledger man, not me. But there was no real bite in it. She turned the card with one finger. 3,000 then, near enough. And if this Vane has bought all of it, then he holds a note he can call whenever he likes. Samuel's jaw tightened. And he's been here once already, smelling around asking when your husband means to come home. Which means he's not sure of his ground yet. A man that sure doesn't ask questions. He just acts. The questions tell me he's still putting his pieces together. Then we don't give him time to finish. No, Samuel said. We don't. She watched him a moment in the candlelight. This man who had walked in at noon to end their marriage and was now bent over her father's debts like they were his own. You could still walk away from this, she said. Clear it and go the way you planned. You don't have to sit at my table and make it your fight. I made it my fight at the altar, Samuel said. I just took 2 years to remember it. She didn't answer that. She got up slow, one hand at the small of her back, and Samuel was halfway out of his chair before she waved him down. Sit. I'm with child, not crippled. If you leap up every time I stand, you'll wear out your knees before the baby comes, and then where will we be? But she said it without heat, and at the door she stopped. I'll write to Pierce in the morning. You'll write to whoever you must in Richmond. We'll know inside the month exactly what we're standing on. Abigail. She turned. Thank you for letting me stay. I know what it cost you. You don't, she said. But you will. And she went up to bed and left him alone at the table with the card and the candle and the long silence of a house that had not held a man in 7 months. He sat there a long time. Then he took out his own small notebook, the one he carried everywhere, and on a fresh page he wrote a list the way he wrote everything in his cramped accountant's hand. Find Vane's lenders. Clear the notes. And below that, after a moment slower, learn to stay. He underlined the last one twice. The first week was the worst, because the first week neither of them knew the rules. Samuel woke before dawn out of old habit and didn't know what to do with himself. He'd run ships and ledgers and warehouses. He did not know how to run a morning in a house where he was barely tolerated. So he did the only thing he knew, which was work. He found the woodpile low and split wood till the sun was up. He found the east pasture fence sagging where a post had rotted, and he pulled it and set a new one. He found the stable boy whose name was Caleb, and who watched him the whole first day like a man watching a snake he hadn't decided whether to kill, and he asked him what needed doing and listened to the answer and did it. By the third day, Caleb had stopped watching him quite so close. "You work like a man who's done it before," the boy said, grudging, handing him a water dipper. "Thought you was a Boston gentleman." "I was a Boston dock boy before I was a Boston gentleman," Samuel said. "My father loaded ships till his back gave out. I loaded them after him till I'd saved enough to buy a piece of one." He drank. "A man forgets where his hands learned their trade. It's good to remember." Caleb chewed on that. "Miss Abigail know you can work. I don't believe she's had cause to think about it. She'll see it." The boy almost smiled. "She sees everything. You can't put nothing past her. Lord knows folks have tried." That night at supper, Abigail set down her fork and said without preamble, "Caleb tells me you set the east post and mended the pasture fence. It needed doing. It's needed doing since April. I couldn't get a handout from town to do it for less than $1, and I didn't have the dollar to spare." She picked her fork back up. "Don't take that as thanks. Take it as a fact." "I'll take it however I can get it," Samuel said, and for just a second the corner of her mouth moved, and then she caught it and put it away, and they finished the meal in a silence that was for the first time not quite hostile. The letters from Richmond began to come back in early August, and they were worse than Samuel had feared. He read them at the kitchen table by the morning light, while Eleanor worked the stove behind him, and he went so still over the third one that the old woman turned around. "What is it?" she said. Not asked. Said. "Vane's got all of it." Samuel set the letter down. "Every note against this land. He bought the last of it in June, 2 weeks after he stood in this parlor, and asked when I was coming home. He bought it knowing I wasn't here, knowing the house was weak." His hand flattened slow on the table. $3,200, and he's filed papers in Richmond to call the whole sum due on the 1st of October. Eleanor put down her spoon. October. October. That's 8 weeks. That's 8 weeks. Samuel looked up at her. "And the baby's due the end of August. Pratt says maybe sooner. Which means Vane'll come to call the note at the exact worst hour of Abigail's life. A new mother week from the birth, a baby at the breast, and a courthouse summons on the table." His voice had gone very quiet and very cold, and Eleanor took a half step back from it. "He planned it that way. The dates aren't an accident. He waited for her to be carrying so she'd be down when he struck." Eleanor's face had gone gray. "You can't tell her that." "I have to tell her." "You will not." The old woman crossed the kitchen and put both fists on the table and leaned into his face, 65 years old, and not afraid of him in the least. "You listen to me, Boston. That girl has held this house up with her 2 hands and her stubborn back for 7 months while you played the merchant prince 300 miles north. She's lost 2 babes already. 2. And Pratt says she ain't strong, and a woman that ain't strong can lose a third if she's frightened bad enough at the wrong time. You go up them stairs and tell her a man's coming to take her father's land the week she gives birth, and you might as well take the baby's life in your own 2 hands. Her voice cracked, but her eyes didn't. "You want to make it right? Make it right quiet. Fix it before she ever has to know how close it came. That's what a man who stays does. He don't unload his fear on a woman who can't carry it. He carries it himself." Samuel looked at her for a long moment. "You love her," he said. "I birthed her," Eleanor said. "Her mama died doing it, and I caught her in these 2 hands, and I have stood between that girl and the world every day of her life since, and I will stand between her and you if I have to husband or no, now. What are you going to do about Vane? I'm going to pay it." Samuel folded the letter. $3,200. I can cover it. It'll take most of what I have liquid, but I can cover it. I'll write Pierce today and have him draw the funds, and I'll clear the whole note before October, and Vane will never set foot on this land again." Eleanor straightened slow. Something in her face eased. Just like that. Just like that. "Then why?" she said, watching him. Do you look like a man who's just found a second snake in the same boot?" Samuel didn't answer right away. He picked the letter back up and read the last lines again, the part he hadn't said aloud. "Because Vane's no fool," he said finally. "A man like that doesn't spend $3,000 buying up notes on a piece of Virginia farmland just to be paid back at face value. There's no profit in it. He bought this debt to take the land, not the money. So when I pay him off, and I will, he's going to lose what he came for. And a man like Vane doesn't lose what he came for and tip his hat and ride away." He set the letter down. "He'll look for another way in. And the first place he'll look is the weakest seam in the whole house." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "Which is the marriage," Samuel said quietly. "A husband who abandoned his wife. A wife who told the whole county he did. There's no record anywhere that I've come home, Eleanor. As far as the law in Spotswood County know, Abigail Ashcroft is a woman alone, deserted by her husband, with no man's name standing behind her land." He looked up. "If Vane can't take the land for debt, he'll try to take it some other way. And a deserted wife with a shaky claim and a dead father is the easiest mark in the Commonwealth of Virginia." The kitchen was silent, except for the pop of the stove. "Then you'd best stop being a secret," Eleanor said. "Yes," said Samuel, "I'd best." He found Abigail in the garden where she went most mornings now before the heat came up, moving slow between her mother's old roses, with a basket she wasn't really filling. He told her about the note. He told her about October. He did not tell her what Eleanor had forbidden him to tell her, the part about the dates about Vane choosing the week of the birth on purpose. But he told her the rest, and he told her he meant to pay it, and he watched her take it, the way she took everything square in the chest, chin level. "You'll spend your own money to clear my father's debt," she said. "I'll spend it to clear our debt. We're still married, Abigail, whatever else we are. Your father's debt is mine in the eyes of the law, and always has been. And when we're not married, when the papers are signed, then it'll be a gift, and you'll have to live with having taken it, and I'll have to live with having given it. And those are easy things to live with compared to most." He paused. "There's something else, and you won't like it. I haven't liked a single thing you've said since you walked through that door. Why start now? I have to stop being a secret." He said it plain. "Vane thinks this house is a deserted woman alone, as long as he thinks that you're a target. The day he learns your husband's home, and standing behind your land, you stop being easy. I need to be seen, Abigail, in town, in church, as your husband. Or this won't be the last man who comes sniffing after your father's land, thinking there's no one here to fight for it." He watched her face close like a door. "No. Abigail, you don't understand what you're asking." She set the basket down hard. "I told this whole county you left me. Every soul in Spotswood thinks Samuel Ashcroft abandoned his pregnant wife and ran back to Boston. They've been kind to me on the strength of that story. The women bring me bread. Pratt cuts his fee. The minister prays for me by name. And now you want me to walk into church on your arm and have every one of them understand in one breath that I lied to them. That my husband was here all along, or come home, and I never said. They'll think—" Her voice caught. "They'll think I'm a liar or a fool who took back the man who left her, and either way, they'll never look at me the same. They'll look at you," Samuel said, "as a woman whose husband came home, which is the truth. 7 months late. 7 months late is still home." He stepped toward her. "Abigail, I'd carry your shame for you if I could. I'd stand up in that church and tell every soul in it that the fault was mine, that I left, that you did right to say so, that any lie you told was a lie I forced into your mouth by leaving. I'll say exactly that if you'll let me. Let them hate me. Let them think whatever they want about me. But let me stand between you and the next Cornelius Vane, because there will be a next one, and the one after that, as long as you're a woman alone in their eyes." She turned away from him toward the roses and stood with her back to him a long time, and he let her, because he was learning slowly when to fill a silence and when to leave it be. "Sunday," she said at last, not turning around. "We'll go Sunday, and you'll do the talking since you're so eager. And Samuel—" Now she turned. "When they cut me to ribbons after when the women stop bringing bread and start whispering, you'll be the one who made me do it. I want that understood between us. Whatever this costs me, it's on your account, not mine." "On my account," he agreed. "Everything's on my account. I've a long ledger to pay down." "Yes," she said. "You do." But she didn't sound quite as angry as her words, and when she went back to her roses, she let him carry the basket. Sunday came hot and bright, and they rode into town in the wagon with Eleanor between them, like a chaperone, and Samuel felt the whole congregation turn to look the moment he handed Abigail down from the seat. He'd been right that they'd stare. He'd been wrong about what would come after. He had braced for a fight. He had rehearsed on the ride in the words he'd say to the minister and the men on the church steps, the whole careful speech taking the blame onto himself. He never got to give it. Because before he could open his mouth, a broad man in a black coat detached himself from the crowd on the steps and came down them, smiling hand already out, and Samuel knew the face from no portrait and no letter, but knew the kind of it at once. The way you know, a hawk from a sparrow at a distance. "Mr. Ashcroft," the man said warmly. "What a very great pleasure. We'd near given up hope of ever meeting you. Cornelius Vane, sir. I've had the honor of looking after some business interests in this county." He turned the smile on Abigail without dropping it an inch. "Mrs. Ashcroft, you're looking well. You're looking very near your time, aren't you? May I say how glad the whole county will be to see your husband return to you at last? Such a comfort. Such a comfort to a woman in your delicate condition." Abigail's face had gone white as bone. "Mr. Vane," she said, "you remember me. I'm flattered." Vane's eyes moved between the two of them, quick reading, and Samuel watched him do it, and understood that the man was recalculating in real time, fitting this new fact, the husband home present, standing into whatever scheme he'd laid, and not liking how it fit. "I did wonder, ma'am, when I called in the spring whether Mr. Ashcroft might ever grace us. You were quite certain at the time you couldn't say when he'd return, or whether." The smile widened a hair. "And here he is. How fortunate. How very fortunate for everyone. My husband's affairs kept him in Boston," Abigail said, and her voice did not shake, and Samuel could have wept at the steel in it. "They're concluded now. He's home. So I see. So I see." Vane finally let go of Samuel's hand. "Then I'll look forward to discussing certain matters of business with you directly, sir, now that you're returned. Matters touching the estate. There's no rush." That smile again. "Well, there's some rush, but nothing that need trouble a man before his child is even born. We'll speak after the happy event. My warmest congratulations to you both." He tipped his hat and went back up the steps, and the whole exchange had taken 90 seconds, and Samuel stood in the churchyard, with his heart slamming, and understood that the war he'd thought he had 8 weeks to prepare for had just begun in the open, in front of the congregation, with a smile and a tipped hat. Inside through the whole service, he was aware of Vane 3 pews back, and aware of Abigail beside him, sitting straight as a post, and aware that not one woman in that church had come to bring her bread. The whispering started on the steps after. He heard it the way you hear weather coming, a low rustle here and there, a word landing clear. Came back. Took him back. After all that. Pride goes before. He saw Abigail hear it too, saw her chin lift another notch with each fresh murmur, and he stepped close to her side, not touching. Just close the way a man stands beside something he means to shield. It was the minister's wife who finally said it to Abigail's face. A thin, kind-eyed woman named Mrs. Coffey, who had, Abigail told him later, sat with her through 3 of her worst nights that spring. She took Abigail's 2 hands in hers on the church steps and said gently, so gently, it was worse than cruelty would have been, "Oh, my dear, I do hope you know what you're doing taking him back. A man who'd leave you once?" She didn't finish. She didn't have to. She squeezed Abigail's hands and looked at her with such pity that Samuel saw it land harder than any insult could, and Abigail, who had stood square through Vane and through the whispering and through the long cold service. Abigail opened her mouth to answer, and found for the first time all morning that she had nothing. So Samuel answered for her. "Ma'am?" He took his hat off. He'd learned that much, that you took your hat off to a woman in this county, and he held it against his chest, and he spoke loud enough to carry to the knot of women behind her, because he understood suddenly that there was no point saying it quiet. You're right to worry for her. You're right to. A man who'd leave a good woman ought to answer for it, and I'll answer for it to you and to anyone. I left. That's the truth, and I'll not dress it up. My wife told you the truth when she said I'd gone. She's no liar. The only lie told in this matter was the one I told myself, that she'd be better without me, and it was the stupidest lie a fool ever swallowed. He turned the hat in his hands. I don't ask you to forgive me. I don't ask you to like me. I ask one thing, and it's not for me, it's for her. When the talk goes round this county, and it will let it land on me, I earned it. She didn't. She held this place alone 7 months, and never once cried poor or asked for pity she hadn't earned twice over. Whatever's said, say it about me. Leave her be. The churchyard had gone quiet. Mrs. Coffey looked at him a long moment. Then she looked at Abigail, and something moved in her thin, kind face, and she let go of Abigail's hands and reached out, and to Samuel's astonishment, patted his arm. Well, she said, that's more than most of them ever say. And to Abigail low, I'll bring the bread Thursday same as always. You let me know the hour your time comes, and I'll come sit. I sat with you for the bad ones. I mean to sit with you for the good. And she gathered her skirts and went. In the wagon on the way home, Abigail didn't speak until they were past the last houses of the town. Then, looking straight ahead at the road, she said, You didn't have to do that. I did. You could have let me answer her. You didn't have an answer. I watched you reach for one. There wasn't one there. He kept his eyes on the horses. There's no shame in it, Abigail. A woman can be the strongest soul in 3 counties and still run dry of words on the church steps, with the minister's wife pitying her to her face. I had words because it wasn't my heart she was reaching into. It was easy for me. It cost me nothing. Don't make it more than it was. Beside him, Eleanor said nothing, but Samuel saw the old woman's hands fold a little tighter in satisfaction in her lap. And Abigail was quiet a while, and then she said so soft he almost missed it under the wheels. It cost you something. I saw your hands. You turn your hat in your hands when it cost you something. She looked over at him. I've been watching you 12 years, Samuel Ashcroft, 2 of them married. You think I don't know your tells? You turned your hat half off the brim. He didn't answer. He couldn't exactly. Cornelius Vane, she said, then changing it because she'd reached the edge of what she could afford to feel and stepped back from it the way she always did. He knew you'd come home before we walked up those steps. Did you see his face? He wasn't surprised. He was disappointed. He'd built something on me being alone, and you've gone and ruined it just by standing there, and he doesn't like it. She frowned. What did he mean, some rush? He said there's no rush. Then he said there's some rush. What's the rush, Samuel? And there it was, the question he'd been dreading, the one that led straight to the part Eleanor had forbidden him to tell her the dates, the deliberate cruelty of the timing. He chose his words like a man crossing a creek on wet stones. The note comes due the 1st of October, he said. That much was already hers to know. That's all the rush there is. I'll have it cleared before then. Long before. You've nothing to fear from vain Abigail. I give you my word. She studied the side of his face for a moment too long, and he kept his eyes on the road and his hands steady on the reins, and whatever she read there, she let it go. For now. The middle of August brought the heat that broke men's tempers, horses' patience, the resolve of women carrying children through their last weeks, and it brought on a Tuesday the letter from Pierce that Samuel had been waiting for and dreading both. He read it standing in the yard where the post had found him, and he read it 3 times, and then he went very still in a way that Caleb, watching from the stable door, said later, put him in mind of a man who'd heard ice crack under his feet on a pond. The money wasn't there, not all of it. Pierce wrote it plain and apologetic in his careful lawyer's hand. The funds Samuel believed he held liquid in Boston were tied up a shipping venture he'd put his capital into the spring before 2 vessels and their cargo, due back from the Indies in June, were overdue. Long overdue. The kind of overdue that in the language of the wharves meant the sea had likely taken them. Until they came in or were declared lost. Samuel's money was at the bottom of the Atlantic, or in a warehouse in Kingston, and either way it was not in Boston, and it was not coming in time to clear $3,200 by the 1st of October. Samuel stood in the yard and did the arithmetic. And the arithmetic was the one thing he'd never gotten wrong, and the arithmetic said he could not pay. He could raise perhaps half. He could sell the Boston house, but not in 8 weeks. A forced sale that fast would fetch a fraction, and even a fraction couldn't be turned to cash by October. He could borrow, but the men who'd lend to him quick were the same breed as Vane, and he'd only be trading one wolf for another. He had ridden 100 miles to give his wife her land free and clear and walk away clean, and he could not do it. The one thing he'd been certain of, the one thing that was just arithmetic, the thing he'd promised her on the church road not 3 days past. You've nothing to fear from Vane. I give you my word. He could not make good. He folded the letter and put it in his coat, and he stood in the yard a long while, and Caleb watched him, and did not come over because even a boy of 15 knew the look of a man who needed to be let alone with bad news. He did not tell her that night, or the next. He told himself it was for the reasons Eleanor had given. She wasn't strong. The fright could harm the child. A man who stays carries his own fear. But lying in the drafty east room those 2 nights listening to the mouse Eleanor hadn't caught, and the old house settling, and once faintly through the floor, the sound of Abigail moving slow and sleepless overhead, he made himself look at the truer reason, because he had promised her and himself that he was done walking out of rooms before the hard thing got said. The truer reason was that he was ashamed. He had stood on the church road and given her his word like a coin he was sure of, and the coin was bad, and to tell her now was to show her that Samuel Ashcroft's word was worth exactly what she'd always believed it was worth, which was to say, nothing you'd want to carry to market. On the 3rd night, he heard her cry out. He was up the stairs before he decided to move in his shirt. No candle, and he hit her door with his shoulder, half expecting blood, expecting the worst, expecting the 3rd one taken like the other 2. She was sitting up in bed with a candle already lit, both hands pressed flat to the swell of her breathing in the careful counted way Pratt had taught her, and she looked up at him, standing in her doorway, wild-eyed and white, and said, "It's the false pains. Pratt warned me of them. It's not the baby. Samuel, it's not the baby. Breathe. You look worse than I feel." He came and sat on the edge of the bed because his legs wouldn't hold him, and he was shaking, and she watched him shake. "You came fast," she said. "I thought—" He couldn't finish it. "I know what you thought." Her hands eased on her belly. The pain was passing. He could see it go out of her face. "I thought it too the first time these came. Pratt says it's the body practicing. Cruel sort of practice." She breathed. "You can light the lamp if you mean to stay, and you may as well stay. I won't sleep now, and neither will you, not after that." He lit the lamp. He sat in the chair by her bed, the one she must have sat in herself through, how many of these nights alone, and the thought of her sitting in it alone month after month, breathing through false pains in an empty house with no one but a 65-year-old woman down the hall, undid something in him. "Abigail, don't," she said, not unkindly. "Whatever it is on your face, it's 3 in the morning, and I haven't the strength for a hard thing at 3 in the morning. Talk to me about something easy. Talk to me about—" She cast about. "Tell me about the docks. When you were a boy, you said your father loaded ships. I've been married to you 2 years, and I don't know one true thing about you before you were rich. Tell me one." So he told her. He told her about being 8 years old and small for it, and carrying water to the men on the wharf for a penny a day, and about his father, who could lift a barrel 2 men's size, and who came home at night too tired to talk, and who died at 49, with a back bent like a question mark. He told her about the first dollar he ever saved, and the second, and how it took 11 years to save enough to buy 1/8 share of one ship, and how that ship came in fat with sugar, and made him in one voyage more than his father had earned bending his back for 30 years. He told her about learning to talk like a gentleman by listening about buying the right coat, about the first time a Beacon Hill door opened to him, and how he'd stood on the step, certain they'd see the dock boy under the coat and throw him back in the street. They never did, he said. That's the strange part. You put on the coat and learn the words and they never look under it. I kept waiting to be found out. 20 years I've waited. Nobody ever looked. I looked. Abigail said. He glanced at her. The night your father's friend introduced us. You don't remember it the way I do. You were 30 and rich and cold as a Boston February, and you bowed over my hand like you'd read in a book how it was done. She almost smiled. And I thought there's a frightened boy in an expensive coat. I was 19, and I saw it in one look, and I thought that one spent his whole life sure he's about to be thrown out of the room. Her smile faded. And then I married you, and you were thrown out of so many rooms in your own head that you finally just left mine. Before I could do it for you. That's what you do, isn't it? You leave the room before they can throw you out. You've done it your whole life. You did it to me. Samuel sat very still in the lamplight. Yes, he said. That's exactly what I do. I know, I told you. I've been watching you 12 years. She leaned her head back against the headboard, tired, and closed her eyes. Tell me you're not doing it now, Samuel. Tell me you're not already halfway out my door in your head, looking for the thing that'll make leaving make sense, so that when you go this time, you can tell yourself you had to. And there it was. The opening. The exact moment to tell her about Pierce's letter, about the ships, about the money that wasn't there, about the word he'd given her on the church road that he couldn't keep. She'd handed it to him all unknowing, asked him outright if he was hiding something. Asked him to be honest, the way he'd sworn he'd be. He looked at her eyes closed, exhausted 3 weeks from her time, not strong, breathing through a night of false pains, and he heard Eleanor's voice. You don't unload your fear on a woman who can't carry it. And he heard his own voice on the church road. You've nothing to fear. And the two of them pulled him in half. I'm not halfway out your door, he said. It wasn't a lie. He wasn't leaving. But it wasn't the whole truth either, and he knew the difference, and he knew that she'd told him not 3 days before, that she lied to him sometimes, and that they'd have to work on it, and he understood with a sick clarity that he had just done to her the precise thing they'd agreed to stop doing, and that he'd done it telling himself it was kindness. Abigail opened her eyes and looked at him. For a moment, one long moment, he thought she saw it, thought she read it on him the way she read everything. The turned hat, the tells 12 years of watching. He waited for her to call it. But she was tired, and the night had been hard, and she wanted to believe him more than she wanted to catch him, and that wanting was its own kind of trap that they had both walked into before. All right, she said softly. All right, I believe you, and that her believing him was worse than any pain she could have given him. And Samuel Ashcroft sat in the chair by his wife's bed in the small hours of the morning, and understood that he had just told the first lie of his second chance, and that a marriage doesn't die of a single great betrayal, but of exactly this. The small kind thing said in the dark, to spare someone a truth, the letter not mentioned, the fear, not shared, the room half left while you tell them you're still in it. He sat with her until she slept. Then he went down to the cold east room and lit no lamp, and lay awake until the window grayed, doing arithmetic that would not come right, no matter how he worked it, and listening through the floor to the silence of a house he had promised to protect and did not yet know how to save. The lie sat at the breakfast table between them for 3 days, like a fourth-place setting nobody would admit was laid. Samuel ate little and slept less. He wrote 2 letters to Boston and tore up the first, and sent the second asking Pierce to find a buyer for the house at any price that could be turned to cash by the last week of September. And he knew, even as he sealed it, that no honest sale moved that fast, and that the men who moved that fast were not honest. He rode into Richmond on a Thursday and sat across a desk from a lender with a soft voice and hard eyes, who offered him the money at a rate that would have made Vane himself blush, and Samuel walked out without signing, because a man does not climb out of one wolf's mouth by setting his foot in another's. He came home with nothing and told Abigail he'd been to see about a horse. You don't need a horse, she said. The bay's getting old. The bay's 7. So are you in horse years. She watched him hang his hat. You've been to Richmond twice this week, Samuel. A man doesn't ride to Richmond twice in a week about a 7-year-old horse. She let it sit a moment. But I expect you'll tell me when you're ready. You always were a man who'd rather carry a thing alone till his back broke than ask for a second pair of hands. I married that man. I knew what I was getting. It would have been so easy to tell her then. She'd cracked the door for him the way she had 3 nights running. He looked at her standing there, round and tired and patient. 3 weeks from her time, and the words were right there. Pierce wrote me. The ships are lost. I can't pay. I gave you my word on the church road and I can't keep it. And they would not come, because to say them was to hand her in. Her last weeks, the one fear he'd sworn to keep off her, and because under that, deeper than that, in the cold place he'd lived in his whole life, Samuel Ashcroft was ashamed. So he said, "The bay's getting old, again like a fool," and Abigail looked at him a moment longer and then turned and went to lie down, and he stood in the front hall hating himself with a thoroughness he'd had years to perfect. Eleanor found him there. "You ain't told her." "No. You said you was going to fix it quiet." "I'm trying to fix it quiet. Quiet's not the same as fast." He rubbed his face. "Eleanor, I can't raise it. Not by October. The money I was sure of is on a ship that's likely on the bottom of the sea, and the rest I can't turn to cash quick enough, and the men who'd lend it fast would own us both inside a year. I've spent 3 days looking, and there's no honest way to put $3,200 on that courthouse table by the 1st of October. He looked at her. "I came here so sure. I told her she'd nothing to fear from Vane. I told her on the church road in front of God, you've nothing to fear, and it was a lie before the words were cold." The old woman studied him a long moment. "My Robert," she said finally. "Abigail's daddy, he carried that debt 11 years. You know how he carried it. Not by raising the money. He never had the money, not once, not for one day. He carried it by knowing the land better than the men who held the paper. He used to say, 'Eleanor, a note's just a man's claim that you owe him, and a claim's only as good as the paper under it. You keep your papers, girl. You keep every scrap. The day they come to take what's yours, it ain't the money saves you. It's the receipt." She looked hard at Samuel. "He kept everything, every scrap. It's all in his strongbox in the study where Abigail's never let me throw out so much as a grocer's bill of his." Samuel went very still. "You're saying there might be something in those papers?" "I'm saying. Eleanor said that if a man's going to take this family's land, the man who built this family kept 40 years of reasons he can't. And the only person in this house who's read every scrap of Robert Harper's papers is his daughter. So maybe instead of riding to Richmond to crawl to wolves, you ought to go ask your wife what's in her own father's box. She knows that land's bones better than you'll ever know your ledgers. Or did you think the only one in this marriage who could do arithmetic was the Boston man? It landed like a slap, and it was meant to." He found Abigail not lying down after all, but sitting up in the study, her father's strongbox open on the desk in front of her, papers spread under the lamp, and she looked up when he came in with an expression he couldn't read. "I couldn't sleep," she said. "And I got to thinking. You keep saying you'll handle Vane, handle the note, handle. And I got to thinking, it's my father's debt on my father's land, and I've never once in my life sat down and read what he actually owed and to whom. I let him carry it. Then I let you carry it. And I am so tired, Samuel, of being a thing that gets carried." She put her hand flat on the papers. "So I'm reading it myself. All of it. Sit down or don't, but I'm reading it. Abigail. 3 lenders." She wasn't listening. She was deep in it now, her finger moving down a column in her father's faded hand. "Daddy borrowed from 3 men in Richmond, Tarleton Bissell and a man named Coyle. Coyle was the biggest, near half of it. Tarleton and Bissell the rest." She looked up. "You said this Vane bought all 3 notes." "That's what Pierce's letter said. All 3. He holds the whole debt now." "All 3, she repeated and frowned and went back into the box, and Samuel watched her dig, and he didn't sit, because something in her stillness had begun to prick at him. She came up with a paper folded in quarters, old, the crease gone soft. She opened it. She read it. And Samuel watched the blood go out of her face, and then come back into it all at once, and she looked up at him with her eyes very bright. "Samuel, what did you tell me that first day about my father's debt? About clearing part of it?" "I cleared 1 note, the spring we married. Your father asked me to keep it from you. Which one? Which lender? I don't, it was 2 years ago. He stopped because she was holding the paper out to him, her hand not quite steady, and he took it and turned it to the lamp and read it, and his own breath stopped in his chest. It was a receipt. Dated April 2 years past, in the hand of a Richmond attorney, witnessed and stamped. It acknowledged payment in full from Samuel Ashcroft of the note held by one James Coyle against the Harper estate, the largest of the three, near half the whole debt, principal and interest satisfied and discharged. Coyle's note is paid, Abigail whispered. You paid it 2 years ago. It's gone. It's been gone since before I knew there was a debt at all. Then, Samuel's mind was moving fast now, the cold machine of it turning over. Then Vane can't have bought it. There was no Coyle note to buy. It was discharged. Unless, Abigail said slowly, Coyle sold it anyway. They looked at each other. A man's paid in full, Samuel said. He's got the money in his pocket. And 2 years later a buyer comes through, a man like Vane, buying up old paper on a struggling estate, and offers Coyle good coin for a note that's already been satisfied. A note Coyle's supposed to have surrendered and didn't. His voice had gone quiet and dangerous. Coyle takes the money, sells Vane a debt that doesn't exist anymore, pockets it twice, once from me, once from Vane, and Vane rides off thinking he's bought half the Harper debt when he's bought a discharged note worth exactly nothing. Can a man do that? He can do it, Samuel said. It's fraud. It's plain fraud, and if it's discovered, Coyle hangs for it or near enough, and the note's void. The question is whether Vane knows. He was turning the receipt in the lamplight, and Abigail saw his hands and saw that they were steady, which she had learned meant the opposite of calm. If Vane bought it knowing it was paid, if he and Coyle cooked it together to swell the debt and frighten you, then they're in it together and we can break them both. And if Vane bought it honest, cheated by Coyle, same as your father was, then Vane's holding a worthless note he paid good money for, and the day he learns it, he loses near half his claim and most of his nerve. He set the receipt down with great care, as if it were made of glass. Either way, Abigail, either way, this paper just cut Vane's claim in half, and the half that's left Tarleton and Bissell near $1,600 that I can raise, that I can put on the courthouse table by October if I sell the Boston house at a loss and don't blink. 1,600 I can do. 3,002 would have sunk me. 1,600 I can do. Abigail sat very still in the lamplight, the open strongbox in front of her, her father's 40 years of kept paper spread under her hands. My father, she said softly. He told you to keep that receipt safe and say nothing, and you did, for 2 years. You forgot you even had it. Her voice was strange. You saved this land 2 years ago and didn't know it. The thing that breaks Vane, you did it before you ever knew Vane's name, before you left me, before any of it. She looked up at him, and there was something in her face he couldn't name. You're not a man who saves people on purpose, are you, Samuel? You do it by accident in the dark, and then you ride away before anyone can thank you. You've been doing it our whole marriage, and I never saw it because you never once let me see it. Samuel didn't answer. He couldn't. Because she was looking at him the way she used to look at him before the second grave, before the cold settled in the way a wife looks at a husband. And it had been so long since anyone had looked at him like that he didn't trust it, and his old instinct rose up in him, the instinct to leave the room before the warmth could be taken back, and for once he fought it down and stayed. There's something I have to tell you, he said. It was the moment. He'd found it. The lie about the money, the lost ships, the Richmond rides, the church road promise he'd thought he couldn't keep. All of it had just changed. Because if 1,600 was all he needed, then the worst of the fear was gone, and he could tell her now without breaking her. Could come clean about the lost ships and the broken word, and walk back into the honesty he'd sworn to and stepped out of. But Abigail was already reaching back into the strongbox, pulling out the next folded paper, her mind running ahead of his, and she opened it and went still in a way that was entirely different from before. Samuel, she said, whose hand is this? What? She turned the paper to him. It was a letter, but not to or from her father. It had been folded inside one of Robert Harper's old land surveys, tucked away forgotten, or hidden a single sheet in a small, cramped, careful hand. And Samuel knew that hand the way he knew his own, because he had read it on grocery accounts and household ledgers and Christmas lists for 30 years of his life. "That's Beatrice Holloway's hand," he said. "Your Boston housekeeper. The one who handles all your post." Abigail's voice had gone flat. "What is a letter in your Boston housekeeper's hand doing folded inside my dead father's land survey in a strong box in Virginia that hasn't been to Boston in 2 years?" Samuel took it. He read it. And the floor of the world for the second time that summer went out from under him. It was addressed to no one by name. "Dear Sir," it began, and it was dated the previous spring, March, 3 months after Samuel had left for Boston. It was short, it was businesslike, and in Beatrice Holloway's neat, careful hand, it informed the unnamed gentleman that the situation he had inquired about remained as she had described, that Mr. Ashcroft had quit the Virginia property and returned to Boston with no intention of going back. That the marriage was in all but name dissolved. That Mrs. Ashcroft was alone on the estate with only an old servant. That the late Mr. Harper's debts remained unpaid and the property poorly defended, and that in Mrs. Holloway's considered opinion, a patient gentleman of business would find no obstacle and a great deal of opportunity, and that she remained as ever his obedient servant, and would continue to see that no correspondence passed between husband and wife to disturb the present favorable arrangement. Samuel read it twice. Then he set it down on the desk very gently, and he put both hands flat on the desk on either side of it, and he bowed his head, and for a long moment he didn't speak at all. "She didn't just hide the letters," Abigail said, watching him. "Your housekeeper. She didn't just keep us apart out of spite. She sold us. She sold the state of our marriage to a stranger. She told him we were finished, told him I was alone and weak, told him the land was undefended, and she promised to keep us from writing to each other, so the story would stay true." Her voice was shaking now, not with grief, but with a cold, rising fury. "Samuel, who is the gentleman? Who was she writing to?" He raised his head. "There's no name," he said, "but there's only one man it could be. There's only one patient gentleman of business who came to this county asking after a struggling estate and a deserted wife and an unpaid debt." He met her eyes. "Beatrice Holloway has been feeding Cornelius Vane for a year. She hid your letters and mine, not out of snobbery. Not only that, she hid them because Vane was paying her to keep us apart. A married couple reconciled is a defended estate. A man come home is a man who fights for his land. She kept us broken because Vane needed us broken. The two of them have been working this from the start." His jaw was iron. "I left you in December because I thought you couldn't bear the sight of me. And from the day I left, that woman in my own house has been selling my marriage to a land thief by the letter." The silence in the study was total. Then Abigail laughed a short, terrible, disbelieving sound and pressed the back of her hand to her mouth, and Samuel was around the desk and at her side before he knew he'd moved, because he thought it was the pains again. But it wasn't. It was something worse. It was a woman who'd held herself square through 7 months of abandonment, finding out that the abandonment itself had been engineered, bought and sold, that the loneliest year of her life had been a thing arranged for profit by 2 strangers in good coats. "Don't," she said when he reached for her. "Don't touch me, I'll come apart just—" She breathed. She put both hands on the swell of her belly and breathed the counted way Pratt had taught her, and Samuel knelt beside her chair and did not touch her, and watched her fight her own body back to stillness. "All this time," she said when she could, "all this time I thought the worst thing was that you didn't want me. That you read my letters and chose not to come. And now you're telling me you never got them. And the reason you never got them is that a woman I've never met was paid to keep them from you. That my whole year alone was—" her voice broke at last all the way through, "was a transaction. That somebody made money off me crying alone in this house." "Yes," Samuel said. "Say it plainer." "They used your grief," he said low, and even kneeling beside her, "as a tool. Vane needed you weak and alone to take your land. Holloway gave him weak and alone, and kept us from fixing it for a price. Every night you sat up alone in this house, every false pain you breathed through by yourself, every letter you wrote me that wore through at the creases, that was the product they were selling. I won't lie to you to make it gentler, Abigail. You asked me to stop doing that. They made money off your loneliness. That's the truth of it. And I handed it to them because I left, and I left because I was a coward. And so the first link in the whole rotten chain was me. She looked at him, tears running, and she did not wipe them. Why are you telling me this? She said. Eleanor would have told you to keep it from me, to handle it quiet. The fright could harm the baby, that's what she'd say. Why are you telling me the cruelest version of it on your knees 3 weeks before my time, when you could have burned that letter, and I'd never have known? And Samuel understood that this right here was the whole of it, the test of whether he'd learned anything at all, and he gave her the only answer he had. Because I lied to you 3 nights ago, he said. In your room. You asked me if I was halfway out your door, if I was hiding something, and I told you I wasn't, and I was. I've been lying to you for a week. Pierce wrote me the day before. The ships I'd staked my money on are lost, near certain lost, and the money I swore to you on the church road, the money I said would clear Vane and keep you safe, I don't have it. I rode to Richmond twice trying to raise it, and crawled to lenders worse than Vane, and couldn't do it, and I came home and told you I'd been looking at a horse. His voice didn't break, but it cost him not to break it. I told myself I was sparing you. Same as I told myself in December. I am so practiced at sparing you, Abigail, that I can do it without even noticing I've started, and every single time what I'm really sparing is myself, my shame, my fear, the look on your face when you find out I'm not the man I let you think I am. So no, I am not going to burn that letter and handle it quiet and let you live easy on a comfortable lie. I have spent our whole marriage handing you comfortable lies, and they nearly killed us, and I am done. Here's the ugly truth. All of it on my knees. I lost our money. I broke my word to you. 2 strangers sold your loneliness for a profit, and the man kneeling in front of you started the whole disaster by walking out a door. That's where we are. That's the real ground. And I would rather have you furious at me on real ground than grateful to me on a lie. The lamp burned. The house was silent. Somewhere far off, a dog barked twice and stopped. Abigail looked at her husband kneeling on her father's study floor, surrounded by 40 years of kept paper, and she reached out slowly, and she did not slap him, and she did not push him away. She took his face in both her hands, the way she had that first day, and she held it, and she looked into it for a long, long moment. There he is, she said softly. Who? The man my father trusted. I've been waiting 2 years to see him. Her thumbs moved against his jaw. You think the worst thing you ever did was leave. It wasn't. The worst thing you ever did was come home and keep being the same coward in a new room. And the best thing you've ever done in your life, Samuel Ashcroft, is what you just did this minute, which is, tell me the truth when a lie would have been easier and kinder and safer and I'd never have known. Do you understand me? That's the thing. Not the receipt, not the money, not the land. That. If you can keep doing that, if you can stand in front of me on real ground, even when the ground's ugly, then I don't care if we lose every acre your housekeeper sold and live in a tenant's shack. I never needed you to be rich. I needed you to be here, all of you, the shame and the fear and the cowardice and all here where I can see it. You've been here 3 weeks and you just arrived this second. Her tears were falling on his hands now. Welcome home. Samuel Ashcroft put his head down on his wife's knees, careful of the child between them, and wept, and Abigail Harper put her hand in his hair, and let him, and neither of them said anything for a long time, because everything that needed saying had finally been said. Then Abigail wiped her face and straightened, and the steel came back into her, and she said, Now, get up. We've a thief to catch, and a land to keep, and I'll be damned if I'll lose my father's farm to the 2 people who sold my loneliness by the pound. Hand me my father's box. We're going to read every scrap in it tonight, and then you and I are going to ride into town and put the fear of God into Cornelius Vane together, and this time, husband, you are not handling one single thing without me. They worked through the night. By the gray of morning, they had it laid out on the desk in 2 neat stacks, the way Samuel laid out everything, but it was Abigail who'd built the stacks. Abigail, who knew which survey matched, Which deed? Which lender's note tied to which parcel? Abigail, who'd grown up at her father's elbow learning the bones of this land, the way Samuel had learned ledgers. The receipt for Coyle's note sat on top the keystone of the whole thing. The letter in Beatrice Holloway's hand sat beside it. "It isn't enough to know it," Abigail said, rubbing her eyes. "We have to be able to prove it. The receipt proves Coyle's note was paid, that's solid. It's witnessed and stamped. No court in Virginia would honor a note Coyle already gave a discharge on. That breaks half of Vane's claim cold." She tapped the Holloway letter. "But this only proves Holloway's a snake. It doesn't name Vane. A clever lawyer would say it could be any gentleman that we're guessing. It frightens Vane, but it doesn't hang him." "It does one thing," Samuel said. "It tells us Vane's not a patient man playing a clean game. He's a man who paid a servant to break a marriage and hide letters. That's a man with things to hide. And a man with things to hide doesn't want to fight in open court where his own dealings get read out loud." He looked at her. "We don't have to hang him, Abigail. We just have to make him understand that if he tries to take this land, we'll burn his whole reputation down with him in the process. We hold the Coyle receipt over the legal half and the Holloway letter over the rest. Half his claim is fraud he can't collect. The other half he can't pursue without us making very public the question of how a Boston land agent came to know so much about a Virginia marriage." He almost smiled, and it was not a warm smile. He thought he was buying a deserted woman and a defended-by-no-one estate. He's about to find out he's facing a man who reads paper for a living and a woman who knows this land to its roots, and the two of them are very, very angry, and they have his housekeeper's signature. "My housekeeper's not the issue. Yours is." "Mine," Samuel agreed grimly. "And Mrs. Holloway and I are going to have a reckoning of our own the day I set foot in Boston again. But that's for later. Vane's for now." He stood and his back cracked, and he'd been up all night and looked it. But there was something lit in him that hadn't been there in 2 years. "Can you ride into town? It's a long way to ask this far along." "Pratt would have a fit." "Then we'll go without telling Pratt." Abigail looked at him, and slowly, for the first time since he'd walked through her door in July, she smiled at him. A real one. Full, unguarded, a smile he hadn't seen on her since before the second grave. "Why Samuel Ashcroft?" she said. "I do believe you're learning to break the rules. There may be hope for you yet." They never got to ride into town. It started in the wagon, before they'd even cleared the gate, a tightening low and deep that Abigail had felt 100 times that summer, and dismissed 100 times as the false pains the body's cruel practice. She breathed through it and said nothing, and Samuel, who was learning her, tells the way she'd long ago learned his, saw her hand go to her belly and her jaw set and said, "Is it the practice ones?" "Yes," she said. "Drive on." He drove on. But before they reached the bend in the road, she made a sound she had never made before, low and surprised and frightened, and her hand closed hard on his arm, and when he looked at her, there was a new kind of fear in her face entirely. "Samuel, turn the wagon around." "Abigail, turn it around now. These aren't the practice ones." Her breath was coming short. "These don't stop. The practice ones stop. These—" Another tightening took her, and she bent over it, gripping his arm, and when it passed, her face was white. "It's 3 weeks early. Pratt said I'm not strong through it. It's too early, Samuel. It's too early. Turn the wagon around and ride for Pratt. Ride for Eleanor, ride for—" He had the horse turned before she finished, and he drove back up that road faster than the wagon was built to go, one arm around his wife to hold her against the jolting shouting for Caleb before they'd even reached the yard. And Caleb came running, and Eleanor came out onto the porch wiping her hands and took one look and dropped the cloth and started shouting orders of her own. "Caleb, ride for Pratt. And don't you spare that horse, you hear me. You ride like the devil's behind you. Tell him it's Abigail and it's early, and her waters like to break on the road if it ain't already. Go." The boy was gone before she finished. "And you," she rounded on Samuel. "Get her inside up the stairs, mind her back, and then you get out from underfoot, because birthing's women's work, and you'll only faint and crack your head, and give me 2 patients. I'm staying with her. You'll do no such—" "Eleanor." Samuel had Abigail in his arms now, carrying her toward the door, and his voice stopped the old woman cold. I left this woman once. I am never leaving a room she's in again as long as I live. You can fight me in the hall, or you can put me to use, but I am not going anywhere, and if you try to put me out, I will come back through the window. Now where do you want me?" Eleanor Briggs looked at him a long second. "Windows painted shut," she said. "But I take your meaning. Bring her up. You can be of use holding her hands and keeping your fool mouth shut. The minute I tell you to leave, you leave. Agreed?" "Agreed." "Liar," said Eleanor almost with affection, and went up the stairs ahead of them, already rolling her sleeves. It went bad fast. Pratt came. Caleb had ridden like the devil was behind him, and the doctor came at a gallop and was up the stairs with his bag inside the hour. But even Samuel, who knew nothing of birthing, could see in the set of Pratt's mouth and the speed of his hands that this was not how it was meant to go. The pains came too hard and too close. The baby was early and turned wrong. Pratt said low to Eleanor in the corner words like presentation and no time to turn him, that Samuel didn't understand, but understood the weight of. And Abigail was not strong through it exactly as Pratt had feared. All summer she was losing blood, and she was tiring, and the long night without sleep and the year of grief, and the body that had already lost too, were all telling against her at once. The storm came in around midnight, the way Virginia storms come in summer. Sudden and violent rain hammering the roof and thunder walking across the county. And by the light of every lamp in the house, Samuel Ashcroft sat at the head of the bed where Eleanor had put him, and held both his wife's hands and kept his fool mouth shut as ordered, and watched her fight. "You're doing well," he told her between the pains, the only words he was allowed. "You're doing well, Abigail. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. I'm right here. I know where you are." She managed it through her teeth. "You've told me 40 times. I know where you are. You're the one who needs telling." "Then I'm telling myself too." The pains took her, and she crushed his hands and screamed, and he let her crush them, and when it passed, she fell back gray and spent. And there was more blood than there should have been, and Samuel saw Pratt and Eleanor look at each other over the foot of the bed in a way that turned his own blood to water. Pratt came around to him. He spoke low, fast, doctor to husband, the words a man dreads his whole life. "Mr. Ashcroft, I have to speak to you plain, and there's no time to do it gentle. The child's coming wrong, and she hasn't the strength I'd want. I'm going to do everything I can for them both. You understand me, everything. But it may come to a point. It may come. I'm not saying it will, where I can do more to save the one if I'm not dividing myself trying to save the both. If it comes to that point, the choice is the husband's by law and custom, and I'll need it fast, and I'll not have time to ask twice." He held Samuel's eyes. "So I'm asking you now while there's breath to answer in, if it comes to that. If I can save the mother or the child, but the dividing of my hands costs me both, what's your word?" The room seemed to go very quiet, though the storm still hammered and Abigail still gasped through the building of the next pane. And every instinct of the cold accountant in Samuel Ashcroft, the man who weighed and measured and decided from a distance, every instinct that had ruled his whole life, rose up to do the arithmetic. The child was the future. The child was an Ashcroft, the line, the name, the years, and he heard, under all of it, his wife's voice. "From a July afternoon, I have lost 2 children and a father, and the better part of my faith in you, and there is not enough left of my heart to lose you twice." And he understood with a clarity that scoured him clean that he had it backwards, that he'd had it backwards his whole life, that he'd left her in December, weighing a future against a present, and choosing the cold, safe, distant thing, and that there was only one answer a man who'd learned anything could give. "Her." His voice did not waver. "If it comes to it, you save her. You save my wife, whatever it costs. Her." "Mr. Ashcroft, the child. I heard you." Samuel's grip tightened on Abigail's hands. "I can have 100 children. I cannot have another her. There's only the one of her in the whole turning world, and I spent 2 years not knowing it, and I am not spending the rest of my life knowing it and having lost her. You save Abigail. If God wants the child too, then God can have an argument with me about it later, and I'll be glad to have it. But you save her first. That's my word, and it's final, And don't you ask me twice." From the bed between pains very weak, Abigail said, "No." They both looked at her. She'd heard. Of course she'd heard. She heard everything. She was gray and soaked with sweat, and there was blood on the sheets, and her eyes were barely open, but she'd heard, and she turned her head on the pillow and looked at her husband with what strength she had left. "No," she said again. "You save the baby. Pratt, you hear me. Both of you hear me. I've buried two. I will not let a third die so I can live. Do you understand me if it comes to it? The baby." Her hand found Samuel's collar and pulled weak but certain. "I had my life, Samuel. 25 years of it. That child hasn't had a single day. You save the days that haven't happened, not the ones that already have." "Abigail, I'm not arguing." She fell back. "I haven't the breath to argue. But it's the mother's body, and the mother gets a say, and my say is the baby, and you can fight me about it the way you fight Eleanor, which is to say, you'll lose." And Samuel Ashcroft, holding his dying wife's hands in a storm at midnight, did the only thing left to a man who had finally learned to stay in the room with the hard thing. "Then we'll argue about it after," he said, "because nobody's choosing anything. You hear me? Abigail Harper, you stubborn, impossible, better than I deserve woman. Pratt's going to save you both because you're going to do the one thing you've done your whole life, which is the hard thing, the thing nobody thought you had the strength for, and you're going to do it. Because I am right here holding your hands, and I am not letting go, and I am not leaving this room, and a Harper does not quit with her husband. Watching you told me that yourself. You told me your father said it. So we are not choosing. We are both of you living. Now push when Pratt says push, and crush my hands to powder if you have to. But you are not dying in front of me tonight, because I just got you back, and I have a great many years of being a decent man to make up to you, and you are not robbing me of the chance. Do you hear me both? We choose both. Whether it was the words, or the man's hands gripping hers, or her own iron, or Pratt's skill, or the plain mercy of God in a storm." Abigail Harper set her teeth and found somewhere past the end of her strength, in the place her father had always sworn the Harpers kept one more day's worth of fight than anybody counted on the strength to do the hard thing one more time. The storm broke just before dawn, the way storms do all at once, into a dripping silence. And in that silence, thin and furious and alive, came the first cry of a child. Samuel didn't move. He sat frozen at the head of the bed, with his wife's hands still in his gray. Himself, now not daring to believe it, watching Pratt's back and Eleanor's hands, and the small, writhing, furious thing they lifted into the lamplight. And he heard Eleanor say in a voice gone thick, it's a boy, and he's small, but he's loud, and the loud ones live, Lord above, the loud ones live." "Abigail," Samuel turned to his wife. "Abigail, it's a boy. Did you hear, it's a boy and he's Abigail?" For one heart-stopping moment, she didn't answer, and her eyes were closed, and her hands had gone slack in his, and Samuel's whole soul stopped. And then her chest rose and fell, and rose again, and her eyes opened exhausted past the edge of the world, and she looked toward the sound of the crying, and her cracked lips moved. "Loud?" she whispered. "Like his father when he finally starts talking, he doesn't shut up." And the ghost of a smile crossed her ruined face. "Bring him here. Let me see him. I've been waiting." Her breath caught. "I've been waiting 7 months, alone, to see him. Bring him here, Samuel. We did the hard thing. Bring me my son." And Eleanor, weeping openly now, and not ashamed of it, wrapped the small, loud living boy in clean linen, and laid him in his mother's arms. And Samuel Ashcroft sat at the head of the bed in the gray light of the broken storm, with his arm around his wife and his son against her chest. And the three of them stayed like that, breathing alive together, while outside the rain dripped from the eaves, and the long night that had nearly taken everything from him gave it all instead back. They named him Thomas for Abigail's father's father, the old man who'd cleared the first acre of Harper land with an axe and a mule and a stubbornness that had come down through 3 generations to the woman who'd just fought a storm to keep him. Samuel had wanted to name the boy for Robert, for the father-in-law who'd trusted him, when no one else would, but Abigail wouldn't have it. "Robert's gone," she said the second morning, the baby asleep on her chest, and the color just beginning to come back into her own face. "He doesn't need a namesake to be remembered. I'll remember him every day of my life." Thomas is the one who started it all, the first Harper to break this ground. She traced one finger down the baby's tiny, furious fist. And besides, Robert Ashcroft sounds like a banker. Thomas Ashcroft sounds like a boy who'll climb every tree on this place and fall out of half of them. She looked up. Which is what I want for him. Not a banker, a boy who climbs trees. He can be both, Samuel said. A man can climb trees and still do arithmetic. Can he? She looked at her husband, who had not left the room in 2 days, who had slept in the chair when he slept at all, who had a 2-day beard, and the look of a man who'd aged 5 years in one night. I wouldn't know. I married one who could only do the arithmetic. The tree climbing I'm having to teach him late. But she said it gently, and she reached out her free hand, and Samuel took it, and that was the whole of the conversation, and it was enough. Pratt came twice a day for the first week, and his face went from grave to cautious, to by the 7th day, something near a smile. She turned a corner. I didn't think she'd turn. He told Samuel, privately packing his bag in the downstairs hall. I'll be honest with you, the way I was honest that night, I didn't think we'd keep her. She lost more blood than a strong woman ought to walk away from, let alone one carrying the grief she's carried. By rights, she should have slipped away before the storm broke. He fastened the buckle. I've delivered 400 babies in this county, Mr. Ashcroft. I've learned there's the medicine, which is mine, and there's the will, which is the mother's, and there's a third thing I can't name and won't pretend to. That night, she had all three. The will I expected. She's a Harper. The third thing, he glanced at Samuel. The third thing I'd put down to a husband who wouldn't let go of her hands and wouldn't stop talking and wouldn't leave the room. I've seen it before. A body fights harder when there's somebody in the room who'll grieve it unbearably if it quits. You gave her something to come back for. That's not medicine. But I've stopped pretending it doesn't matter. Samuel saw him to the door and couldn't for a moment speak. Send your bill, doctor, he managed finally. All of it. Don't cut it for the dead father this time. I'll pay what it's worth, and it's worth more than money. I'll cut it anyway, Pratt said. I knew Robert Harper. He'd haunt me if I overcharged his girl. And he settled his hat and went out to his horse, and Samuel stood in the door watching him go, and understood that he'd nearly lost everything twice, and been given it back twice, and that a man only gets so many of those before the well runs dry. The well, as it happened, had one more trial in it before the summer was through. Cornelius Vane came on a Thursday, 11 days after the birth, in a good coat and a good carriage, with a lawyer beside him and a leather case on his knees, and he came smiling, as he always came smiling, expecting to find a woman weak from childbed and a husband distracted by a sickly infant, both of them ripe. He did not know that Samuel and Abigail had spent 11 nights in the hours the baby let them reading every scrap in Robert Harper's strongbox by lamplight and building their case the way other couples built a nursery. He did not know about the Coyle receipt. He did not know they'd found Beatrice Holloway's letter. He knew none of it, and he came up the front steps of Harper Estate with the confidence of a man who has counted his cards and likes them. Eleanor met him at the door and did not ask him in. Mrs. Ashcroft is abed, she said. She's 11 days from childbed and not receiving. I'm so sorry to hear it. Vane's smile didn't flicker. Truly. But business is business, and the note I hold against this estate comes due the 1st of October, which is closer than a new mother might like to think. I'd hoped to spare Mrs. Ashcroft the indignity of a courthouse by settling matters here privately between gentlemen. Is Mr. Ashcroft at home? He is at home, said Samuel from the hall behind Eleanor. Show him into the study, Eleanor. Mr. Vane and I have arithmetic to do. Vane's eyes lit at that, because arithmetic was a word he liked, and he followed Samuel into Robert Harper's study with his lawyer trailing and his leather case under his arm, and he sat himself down in the chair across the desk as though he already owned the room, and he opened the case and he laid out his papers with the relish of a man laying out a winning hand. I'll be direct, Mr. Ashcroft, since you're a man of business, Vane said. I hold the entire debt against this estate. All three original notes, Tarleton Bissell and Coyle, purchased and consolidated principal and interest the sum of $3,240 due and payable the 1st of October. I have, of course, no wish to take a man's home. I'm not a monster. So I'll make you the offer. I'd make any gentleman in distress surrender the estate to me now quietly by deed, and I'll forgive the entire debt and pay you besides $500 to remove your family and start fresh elsewhere. It's more than generous. The land won't fetch the debt at a courthouse sale, and you know it. You'd walk away with $500 and your dignity. Refuse, and on the 1st of October, I'll have the whole estate at auction. You'll get nothing, and your wife and infant son will watch strangers carry out the furniture. He sat back. I'd think very hard, sir, about which of those 2 mornings you'd rather your wife wake up to. Samuel let the silence run. Then he reached into the desk drawer and he took out a single folded paper soft at the creases, and he laid it on the desk and turned it so Vane could read it, and he said very quietly, James Coyle's note was paid in full 2 years ago. By me. Here's the discharge witnessed and stamped by Coyle's own attorney in Richmond. The largest of your 3 notes, Mr. Vane, near half your claim was satisfied and void 18 months before you say you bought it, which means either Coyle defrauded you by selling you a discharged note, in which case you've paid good money for nothing, and Coyle hangs for it, or you bought it, knowing it was paid to swell a debt you knew was false, and frighten a grieving woman into surrendering her home. I don't yet know which, but I will. And whichever it is, half your claim just turned to ash on this desk. Vane's smile held, but it cost him something to hold it. A forgery, he said smoothly, or a duplicate of a note long since reinstated. These things are easily, it's witnessed and stamped. Take it to any honest clerk in Richmond and match it against Coyle's own records. Samuel didn't raise his voice. He never raised his voice. He'd learned long ago that the men who win don't have to. You're welcome to call it forgery in open court, Mr. Vane. I'd enjoy that. Because then we'd subpoena Coyle, and Coyle, facing a fraud charge, would sing every name he ever sold a dead note to, and I suspect yours isn't the only one. He let that sit. But that's only half. Here's the other half. And he laid down the second paper. Beatrice Holloway's letter. This is in the hand of my housekeeper, Beatrice Holloway of Boston, who has kept my house 30 years. It's dated last spring. In it she informs an unnamed gentleman of business that my marriage is dissolved in all but name, that my wife is alone and undefended on a debt-burdened estate, that the property is ripe, and that she will personally see to it that no letters pass between husband and wife to disturb the arrangement. Samuel's voice had gone very soft and very cold. She kept us apart for a year, Mr. Vane. Hid my wife's letters and mine. Sold the state of my marriage to a stranger. And the only stranger in this county who came asking after a struggling estate and a deserted wife and an unpaid debt last spring. The only patient gentleman of business it could possibly be is sitting in my dead father-in-law's chair right now with a leather case on his knees. The study was silent. Vane's lawyer had gone very still. There's no name on that letter, Vane said. The smile was entirely gone now. No, Samuel agreed. There isn't. A clever lawyer would tell you it could be anyone, and yours just thought exactly that. I watched him think it. So let me tell you what I think, Mr. Vane, and then let me tell you what I'm offering, because I am in the end a man of business, same as you. He leaned forward. I think you paid Beatrice Holloway to break my marriage and hide our letters, because a reconciled couple is a defended estate and a deserted wife is a mark. I think you and Coyle cooked the false note between you to swell the debt. I think you've done this before in other counties to other families, and I think if I hire a Richmond man to start pulling the thread, the Coyle fraud, the Holloway letters, the pattern of it across every estate you've taken in 10 years, it unravels and you don't survive the unraveling. A land agent's whole trade is his reputation for holding clean paper. The day it gets whispered in Richmond that your paper's dirty, every lender in Virginia stops selling to you and you're finished, and you know it better than I do. That's a great deal of supposition, Vane said, but his voice had changed. It is. And here's the part where I'm generous the way you were generous. Samuel sat back. I'm not going to ruin you. Not because you don't deserve it, you do. But because ruining you means a year in court, and lawyers, and my wife's name read out in public, and Holloway's crimes dragged through every parlor in Boston, and I'd rather spend that year teaching my son to climb trees. So here's the offer, Mr. Vane, and it's the only one, and it doesn't repeat. You'll surrender the Coyle note as void here today, signed before your own lawyer as witness. The Tarleton and Bissell notes the real ones, $1,640, the honest half of this debt I'll pay you, in full, by the 1st of October. At face value, not a penny of your inflated interest. And in exchange for that payment, and for my silence about Coyle and Holloway and whatever else a Richmond man might dig up, you will sign a quitclaim renouncing any and all interest in this estate present and future forever, and you will get into your good carriage, and you will never set foot in Spotswood County again. He slid a fresh sheet of paper and the inkwell across the desk. That's the arithmetic, Mr. Vane. $1,600 and a quiet exit against a year in court and the end of your trade. I've done the sum both ways. So have you, by the look of you. Pick up the pen.
Vane
looked at the paper. He looked at the Coyle receipt. He looked longest at Beatrice Holloway's letter. And Samuel watched the man do the arithmetic he'd been doing his whole life, and watched him arrive at the only answer the numbers allowed. You understand, Vane said, picking up the pen. This is extortion. No, Samuel said. Extortion is what you did to a woman 11 days from childbed. This is a settlement between gentlemen. You said you wanted to settle privately. We're settling privately. Sign by the Coyle line first. Vane signed. His lawyer witnessed it stone-faced. He signed the quitclaim next, renouncing the estate forever, and his hand was not quite steady. And when it was done, Samuel blotted both papers himself and folded them and put them in the drawer and turned the key. You'll have the $1,640 by the last week of September, Samuel said, standing. Pierce will deliver it to your Richmond office and collect your discharge of the Tarleton and Bissell notes. After that, our business is concluded forever. Eleanor will show you out. He paused at the door. And Mr. Vane, one more thing between gentlemen. If I ever learn you've done to another family what you tried to do to mine, if I ever hear your name attached to another deserted wife and another swollen debt, I'll spend every dollar I have hiring the best men in Richmond to take you apart, and I'll do it for sport, and I'll enjoy it more than I've enjoyed anything in years. Do we understand each other? Cornelius Vane gathered his case and his ruined dignity, and did not answer, which was answer enough. And he went out to his good carriage and drove away down the long road, and that was the last that Harper Estate ever saw of him. Abigail was sitting up in bed with Thomas at her breast when Samuel came up the stairs, and she looked at his face and knew before he said a word. It's done, she said. It's done. Coyle's note void. Vane signed a quitclaim. He's renounced this land forever in writing, witnessed by his own lawyer. I'll pay the honest half by October, and Pierce'll handle the rest. Samuel sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly bone-tired, the long, taut weeks of it all draining out of him at once. He's gone, Abigail. Your father's land is safe. It's yours. It was always going to be yours, but now it's safe, and no Cornelius Vane will ever come up that road again. She was quiet a moment, looking down at the baby. My father carried that debt 11 years, she said softly. He died still carrying it, and you settled it in one afternoon across his own desk with his own kept papers, with a receipt you didn't even remember you had. She looked up and her eyes were wet. He'd have liked you, Samuel. He liked you when he gave me to you, but he'd have loved you for this, for using his strongbox to save his land. He always said the receipt would matter more than the money someday. He'd be so... Her voice broke. He'd be so glad. He worried about me to the end. Worried I'd lose it. And you kept it. You kept it. We kept it, Samuel said. I didn't know which paper mattered. You did. You built the case, Abigail. I just read it out to Vane. You're the one who knew this land to its bones. He reached out and touched his son's small head, the dark fuzz of hair, the impossible softness of it. I want to make it permanent. The land. I want it in your name, yours alone, free and clear, before anything else happens, before I go to Boston, before another season turns. Yours, not ours, yours and Thomas's. So that whatever I am, or fail to be, whatever happens to me, no man living can ever take this ground from the Harpers again. Abigail looked at him. You came here in July, she said slowly. To make me sign papers that ended us. And now you want me to sign papers that put everything in my name and leave you with nothing. That's right. Why? Because the first set was about leaving you, Samuel said, and the second set is about staying. A man who's leaving keeps a hold on things, keeps his name on the deed, keeps a string he can pull. A man who's staying gives it all away because he's not going anywhere, so he doesn't need the string. He looked at her steadily. I spent 2 years holding strings, Abigail. Keeping my name on this and that, keeping my distance, keeping my options, telling myself it was prudence. I'm done holding strings. Put the land in your name. Cut every string I've got. If I'm staying, and I am till they bury me, then I don't need a single one of them. And I'd rather you knew that for a fact in writing than took it on my word, because my word's been bad before, and you've no reason yet to trust it. She didn't sign that day. She was too weak and Pierce had to draw the papers, and there were Boston matters to settle first. But she reached out and took his hand, and held it against the warm, small weight of their sleeping son, and she said, All right, we'll put it in my name, but not because you've cut your strings, Samuel. Because I want my son to grow up on Harper Land, knowing it's Harper Land the way I did. That's my reason. Yours is your own business. And then after a moment lower, But I heard your reason, and I'll remember it. A man who stays gives it all away. I'll remember you said that. Boston could not be put off forever. There was the honest half of the debt to pay, which meant selling the Boston house at last. And there was Pierce to settle accounts with. And there was the matter of the lost ships, which had to be chased to its end one way or the other. But more than any of it, the thing that pulled at Samuel like a splinter working toward the bone, there was Beatrice Holloway sitting in his Boston house this very minute, keeping his room, sorting his post, drawing her wages, not knowing that a folded letter in her own hand had crossed 300 miles and undone her. He didn't want to leave Abigail and the baby. He said so plainly the night before he rode. I don't want to go. I want to be honest about that. Every instinct I've got says, don't leave this room. Don't leave this house. Don't put 300 miles between us, because the last time I did that it cost us a year and nearly cost us everything. He was packing the small bag badly, and Abigail watched him from the bed. But it has to be done, and it has to be done by me in person, and it can't be done from here. The house has to be sold to pay Vane's honest half. And Holloway? His jaw tightened. Holloway, I have to do face to face. I'll not dismiss the woman by letter after what she's done. I want to stand in front of her and let her know exactly what I found and exactly what it cost us, and then I want her out of my house and out of our lives, and I want to do it looking her in the eye. How long? Abigail said. 3 weeks, maybe 4. There and back with the house to sell and the accounts to settle. He stopped packing. Abigail, I know what 3 weeks sounds like to you. I know what me riding off to Boston sounds like. I've thought about almost nothing else. He came and sat on the bed. So here's what I'm going to do, and I want you to hold me to it. I'm going to write you every single day, not about the harbor and the price of cotton and the weather. Every day, I'm going to write you one true thing about how I am, and one true thing about how much I want to be home, and I'm going to post it myself, with my own hand, into the postmaster's own hand, so that no Beatrice Holloway, and no anyone, ever stands between my letters and you again. And the day my business is done, I'm on the first horse south, and I'll ride through the night the way I should have ridden the first time you wrote me. He took her hand. 21 days. Count them. And if I'm not back by the 22nd, you have my full permission to believe the worst of me, because it'll mean I'm dead in a ditch, since nothing short of dead is keeping me from this room. Abigail looked at him a long moment. You're afraid I won't believe you'll come back. I'm afraid you've earned the right not to. I have, she said. I have earned that right. And I'll tell you the truth, since we're doing truth now. Part of me is sitting here right now, 11 days delivered, watching you pack a bag for Boston. And part of me is that woman from July, who's already deciding you won't come back, who's already armoring up, who's already telling Thomas not to get attached to the sound of your voice. Her hand tightened on his. That woman's still in here, Samuel. The one who learned the hard way. You don't undo a year of being left and 11 days of being stayed with. She's going to spend these 3 weeks waiting for the letter that doesn't come. Then I'll see to it the letter always comes. See that you do." She pulled him down and kissed him the first time she'd kissed him since December. And it surprised them both, and it was brief and fierce and full of everything neither of them could say. Then she pushed him back and wiped her eyes and said in her ordinary voice, "Now pack that bag properly. You've rolled your shirts like a man strangling chickens. Give it here." And she packed it herself from the bed, the way she did everything better than he could. And that was how they said goodbye. He rode at dawn. Caleb saw him off at the gate. "You comin' back?" the boy said. It wasn't quite a question. "I'm coming back." "'Cause if you don't," Caleb said, "I'll have to look after 'em myself, and I ain't but 15, and Miss Abigail deserves better'n a 15-year-old and a 65-year-old standing between her and the world." "She does," Samuel agreed. "That's exactly why I'm coming back. Mind them till I do." And he rode north, and he kept his word about the letters every single day, one true thing about how he was, and one true thing about how he longed to be home, posted with his own hand. And Abigail received them every day, and read them, and did not let herself believe them, and waited the way she'd told him she would for the one that didn't come. It nearly didn't. Boston went as Samuel expected and worse. The house sold but slow, and for less than its worth, and the closing dragged. Pierce confirmed the ships were lost, both of them gone in a summer gale off the Carolinas men and cargo, and Samuel's capital all at the bottom together. And that was a grief of its own. Money aside, 11 good sailors Samuel had known by name, and Beatrice Holloway. Beatrice Holloway did not break, and did not weep, and did not beg. Samuel had imagined the scene 100 miles worth of times, the confrontation, the woman undone the confession. What he got instead, when he sat her down in the front room of the house she'd kept for 30 years and laid her own letter on the table in front of her, was a straight-backed old woman who read it once and folded her hands and looked at him with no shame in her face at all. "So you found it," she said. "I wondered if you would. I'd thought it burned. You wrote to Cornelius Vane. I wrote to a gentleman who paid me well to do it, and who'd have paid better had you stayed gone as you ought." Her voice was perfectly steady. "I'll not pretend, Samuel. I'm too old to pretend, and you've caught me too clean. Yes, I wrote him. Yes, I kept the girl's letters and yours. 4 of hers, 4 of yours. I have them still. I never burned them. I'm not a fool. A thing kept is a thing that's worth something someday." She nodded at a drawer. "They're there if you want them. I always meant to give them back if it came to this. Call it the one honest thing in a dishonest business." Samuel stared at her. "You kept them. 8 letters. You kept them in that drawer for a year while my wife sat alone in Virginia thinking I'd abandoned her. And you. Why? In God's name, Beatrice. Why? She did nothing to you. She was a girl from Virginia who married above her station. That's the whole of her crime in your eyes, and for that you sold her to a land thief. And you sat on the letters that would have brought me home. Why?" And here at last, the old woman's composure cracked not into shame, but into something older and more bitter. "Because I raised you," Beatrice Holloway said. 30 years. I came to this house when you were 4 years old, and your mother dead, and your father working the docks dawn to dark, and I raised you. I taught you your letters and your manners, and how to hold a fork, and how to talk to your betters, and I made you fit for the world that threw your father away, and I did it because I loved you. You cold, ungrateful boy, the way I'd have loved a son if God had given me one, and a husband to make him with." Her voice shook now. "And then you grew up and got rich and married a farm girl from Virginia, and you were going to take her and any children you had, and go live on her father's land, and leave me here in an empty house to die alone among your furniture. After 30 years, you'd have left me Samuel, the way you left her, the way you leave everyone. You'd have pensioned me off and forgotten my name inside a year. So when the marriage cracked, when you came back to Boston cold and alone, She stopped, pressed her lips. "I helped it stay cracked, because a broken marriage meant you stayed in Boston, meant you stayed where I could, where I still had—" She couldn't finish it. The room was very quiet. "You did it to keep me," Samuel said slowly. I did it because I'm a foolish, jealous, wicked old woman who couldn't bear to be left, Beatrice said, and I'll answer to God for it, and I expect he'll have a good deal to say. But there it is. You wanted the truth, and that's the truth, and it's uglier than you bargained for, isn't it? You thought I did it for Vane's money. The money was nothing. I did it because I loved you, and I was terrified of the empty house, and so I made sure the only family you had was the one in this house, even if I had to keep 8 letters in a drawer to do it. She looked at him old and unbowed and ruined. Now sack me. I've earned it. I'll not contest it. Only... Her composure finally went just at the end, just a little. Only know that the woman who broke your marriage is the same woman who taught you to read the letters you'll use to mend it. I'm both Samuel. I was always both. Most people are. Samuel sat across from her a long time, and then he did the thing that surprised them both. The thing the cold accountant of December could never have done, the thing he'd learned in a Virginia parlor at the foot of a settee. I'm not going to sack you, he said. Don't be a fool. I'm not going to sack you, and I'm not going to forgive you either, because some things shouldn't be forgiven quick, and what you did is one of them. Abigail sat alone for a year because of you. She breathed through false pains alone. She nearly died bringing my son into the world, and she did it 300 miles from me because you kept the letters that would have had me at her side. I will carry my anger at you for that a long time, Beatrice, maybe always. He leaned forward. But I understand it. God help me. I understand it exactly because it's the same disease I've got. You couldn't bear to be left, so you arranged things to keep from being left. And in the arranging, you hurt the very people you were trying to hold. That's me. That's my whole life. You and I are the same sickness wearing different aprons. He stood. So here's what's going to happen. The house is sold. You can't stay here regardless. You'll come to Virginia. Not as housekeeper, Eleanor would put glass in your soup, and I wouldn't stop her. You'll come as what you are, which is the closest thing to a mother I ever had, and you'll live out your years where you can't be alone and can't do any more harm, and you'll spend them making what amends a person can make to a woman you wronged by helping raise the son she nearly died to bear. That's the sentence. It's harder than sacking you. You'll have to look Abigail in the eye every day and know what you did. But you won't die alone in an empty house because whatever you are, you're mine, and I don't leave people anymore. I'm done leaving people, even the ones who've earned it. Beatrice Holloway put her face in her 2 hands, the hands that had written the letter, and the straight back finally bent, and she wept, and Samuel let her the way Abigail had once let him. He came home on the 20th day. He'd written it would be the 21st, but he rode through the last night the way he'd promised, and he came up the long road at dawn with the 8 letters in his coat, and an old weeping woman in a hired carriage a day behind him. And Abigail was on the porch before he reached the gate, because Caleb had seen the dust and run to wake her. And she stood there in her shawl with Thomas in her arms, and watched her husband come home a day early, and she did not let herself believe it until he was off the horse and up the steps and close enough to touch. You're early, she said. Her voice was not steady. I rode through the night. He stopped in front of her suddenly shy 300 miles of certainty, deserting him on the porch. I couldn't the last 100 miles, I couldn't make myself stop. I kept thinking about the letter that doesn't come, the one you said you'd wait for, and I thought the surest way to make sure it never comes is to get there before it could. He swallowed. So I came a day early. I hope you don't mind that I... Abigail Harper shifted her son to one arm and put her free hand flat against her husband's chest, over the coat, over the 8 recovered letters he hadn't told her about yet, and she felt his heart going hard underneath. 20 days, she said. I counted every one. I told myself every morning you wouldn't come. And every morning a letter came instead, one true thing about how you were, and one true thing about wanting to be home. And I read them, and I told myself it didn't mean anything. A man can write letters and still not come. Her eyes filled. And then you came, a day early, riding through the night. Her hand fisted in his coat. Damn you, Samuel Ashcroft. Damn you. You've gone and done it. You've made me believe you. After everything, after I swore I never would again, you stupid, stubborn, impossible man. You rode through the night and you've made me believe you, and now if you ever leave me again, it'll kill me for certain, because I've gone and let the door open. I've gone and... He kissed her then on the porch in front of Caleb and the morning, and God with their son squalling between them at being squashed. And it was nothing like the brief, fierce goodbye kiss 3 weeks before. It was a homecoming, and it lasted. And when it finally broke, Abigail was laughing and crying at once, and Thomas was howling, and Caleb was looking pointedly at the sky, and Eleanor had come out onto the porch and was pretending very hard to have urgent business with a broom. "I brought your letters home," Samuel said against her hair. "All 8. The 4 you wrote me, and the 4 I wrote you." She kept them. Holloway kept them, never burned them. They're in my coat. We'll read them tonight, everyone out loud, the way they were meant to be read. A year late, but we'll read them. Tonight, Abigail agreed, wiping her face. Tonight. But first, you'll come inside, and you'll meet your son properly, who's grown in 3 weeks and doesn't know your face, and you'll eat whatever Eleanor puts down, and you'll tell me everything, all of it, the house and the ships and the money and what you did about that woman. She stopped reading his face. "You didn't sack her." "No." "Samuel, I'll tell you all of it tonight," he said. "Every bit. On real ground, the way we do it now. And you can be furious with me for the part you'll be furious about, and you'll be right to be, and I'll sit in the room while you are, and I won't leave it." He touched his son's wet, furious face. "But not on the porch, not the first morning. Let me come inside first. Let me come home." And Abigail Harper looked at her husband home a day early. Dust of the road still on him, their son between them, and 8 years' worth of unsaid things in his coat. And she stepped back, and she opened the door of her father's house, and she let him in. They read the letters that night, after Thomas was down, and the house was quiet, sitting up in the bed that had nearly become a deathbed with a single candle, and 8 folded papers between them. Samuel read hers first, because he insisted, because he said a man should hear in his wife's own words exactly what his leaving had cost, before he was allowed the comfort of his own. So Abigail handed him the 4 she'd written in the order she'd written them, and he read them aloud, and his voice broke on the first one, and never quite mended through the other 3. The first was the one she'd written the morning Pratt confirmed the child, frightened, hopeful, forgiving, asking him to come home, telling him they'd been given one more chance. The second, a month later, was the same hope worn thinner, asking why he hadn't answered. The third had no hope in it at all. It was a woman informing a man coldly that she understood his silence, that she would manage, that he needn't trouble himself. And the fourth was 3 lines long, and it was the cruelest of them, because it was kind. "I'll not write again. I see now where we stand. The child will be cared for. Live well, Samuel." He set the 4th one down and could not speak. "I wrote that one," Abigail said quietly, "the day I decided you'd chosen silence. I sat at my father's desk and I wrote it, and I sealed it, and I gave it to Eleanor for the post. And then I went out to the chapel where the 2 babies are, and I sat down on the ground between their graves, and I..." She stopped. "I let myself grieve you, like a 3rd one. I sat there, and I buried you next to them, Samuel, in my own heart, and I came back to the house a widow in everything but the word. And I never wrote you again. And I never cried where Eleanor could see. And I started telling the county you'd abandoned me because it was easier than the truth, which was that I'd buried my husband alive in the chapel yard and couldn't tell a living soul." Samuel put his face in his hands. "And that letter," she went on, relentless now because she'd carried it a year and meant to set it down. "At last, that letter that says, 'Live well, Samuel,' that one she kept too, your Beatrice. She kept the letter where I gave you up, and she sat on it. And you sat in Boston that whole year, not knowing your wife had held a funeral for you. You could have come home any day of that year. One letter would have done it. And she kept 8 of them in a drawer." Her voice shook. "I'm not angry at you for that part, I want you to know. That part wasn't you. But I am so angry, Samuel. I'm so angry I can hardly breathe, and I don't even have anywhere to put it, because the woman I'm angry at is 300 miles away, and you didn't sack her. You're bringing her here, to my house, to help raise my son, the woman who buried me alive." She turned to him, and the year of it was all in her face. "You'll have to explain that to me, tonight, because I don't understand it and I'm not sure I can live with it." So Samuel told her. He told her all of it, the straight-backed old woman who hadn't wept until the end, the 30 years, the empty house, the terror of being left. He told her what Beatrice had said: "The woman who broke your marriage is the same woman who taught you to read the letters you'll use to mend it." He told her his own answer, that he and Beatrice were the same sickness, in different aprons, both of them, so afraid of being left that they'd hurt the people they were trying to hold. "I understand her, Abigail," he said. "That's the terrible part. I understand her completely because she's me. She did to us what I did to us for the same reason I did it. And I had two choices when I sat across from her. I could throw her out into the world to die alone in punishment, the way the old me would have, coldly from a distance, with the facts arranged to make it look like justice. Or I could do the thing I've been trying to learn all summer, which is to stay in the room with the person who's hurt me and not leave it, and not arrange the facts, and just sit there in the hard truth of it. And the hard truth is that she's a wicked old woman who did us a great evil, and she's also the only mother I ever had. And both of those are true at once, the way you can love this land and curse the dead on it in the same breath." He took her hand. "I'm not asking you to forgive her. I'd never ask that. I'm asking you to let me not become her. Because if I cast her out to die alone, I'll have proved that the cold accountant won after all, that I never changed, that the man you buried in the chapel yard was the real one. Letting her come here where she has to look you in the eye every day and live with what she did, that's not mercy for her. That's harder than mercy. That's me refusing to leave a single person in a ditch ever again, even the ones who put us there. Even her. Even me." Abigail was quiet a long time. "She buried me alive," she said finally. "She did. And you want me to feed her at my table?" "I want you to decide," Samuel said. "It's your house, your father's house. It's in your name now, or it will be the day Pierce brings the papers. If you say she doesn't come, she doesn't come. I'll find her rooms in town and pay her keep, and she'll live out her days a mile from us and never cross your door. That's your right, and I'll honor it without a word of argument. I'm only telling you what I'd do if it were mine to choose, and why. The choosing is yours. And that handing her the choice, plainly with no string attached and no guilt laid on, was so unlike the man who'd left in December, that Abigail felt the anger in her chest shift, not vanish, but shift, and make room beside it for something else. "Let her come," she said at last. "Abigail, let her come. But on my terms, not yours." The steel came up in her. "She doesn't touch Thomas without me in the room, not for a long time, maybe a year, maybe more, until I've watched her enough to trust her hands. She doesn't sleep under this roof. She'll have the old overseer's cottage where I can see her lamp from my window and know where she is. And she will hear from my own mouth once exactly what she did to me. Not your gentle version, not what she confessed to you, but what it was on this end, the chapel yard, and the funeral, and the year of it. And then we will never speak of it again. Because I'll not spend the rest of my life relitigating it, but she will hear it once in full from me." Abigail's jaw set. "And if she's half the woman you say taught you to read, she'll understand that letting her stay on those terms, looking me in the eye every morning, is the heaviest sentence I could possibly pass. Heavier than sending her away. You're right about that, damn you. Mercy's the cruelest thing I've got." "You're a harder woman than I am," Samuel said with something like awe. "I'm a Virginia woman who married a Boston man and buried 2 babies, and got left for a year and lived," Abigail said. "Of course I'm harder than you. Now read me the rest of your letters, the ones you wrote me. I want to hear what you were saying into the silence while I was burying you in the chapel yard." So he read the 4 he'd written from Boston. The harbor and the cotton and the fog. And Abigail heard under the dull surface of them what she hadn't been able to hear a year ago, when she'd thought them proof of his indifference. A frightened man writing carefully around the only things that mattered, talking about the weather because he didn't dare talk about the grief, sending word he still breathed, because he didn't have the courage to send anything truer. They were cold letters. But she heard the man behind them now, the boy in the expensive coat, sure he was about to be thrown out of the room, and she understood that his coldness and her pride had been the same wound pointing in opposite directions, and somewhere in the reading of the fourth dull, careful letter, she stopped being angry at the letters and started quietly to grieve the year they'd both lost to being exactly who they were. When he finished, they sat in the candlelight with all 8 letters spread on the quilt between them, a year of silence finally spoken aloud. "We were both burying each other," Abigail said softly. "The whole time. You in Boston writing about cotton, me in the chapel yard. 2 people who loved each other holding 2 separate funerals 300 miles apart, and neither one of us dead." She gathered the letters, slowly squaring their edges. "We should keep these. Not to pick at. To remember. So that the next time one of us starts going quiet, starts writing about cotton instead of saying the true thing, we can take these out and remember what the quiet cost us." She put them in the drawer of the bedside table. "There. Our funeral letters. Locked up where we can find them if we ever need reminding." Beatrice Holloway came to Virginia a day later in the hired carriage, and Abigail met her in the yard. And what passed between the 2 women that first hour, neither of them ever fully repeated to Samuel. He'd offered to be there. Abigail refused. "This is between her and me," she'd said. "You don't get to manage it. You don't get to soften it. You'll take Thomas and walk to the chapel and visit the babies, and you'll stay there till I come for you, and you'll let 2 women settle what 2 women have to settle without a man in the middle of it trying to make it easier than it ought to be." So Samuel took his son and walked to the chapel yard the first time he'd stood at the 2 small graves since the day they were dug, and he sat on the ground between them, the way Abigail had told him she'd done the day she buried him alive, and he held his living son, and looked at the 2 stones of the children they'd lost, and he wept for them at last, openly a year and more too late. The grief he'd been too cold and too far away to grieve. And it came to him sitting there, that he'd never once mourned these 2 with their mother. That they'd each grieved them alone in separate rooms and separate cities, and that this sitting on the ground with the living child and crying over the dead ones where their mother could find him doing it, was the funeral they should have held together and never had. When Abigail came for him an hour later, her eyes red, her back straight, she found him there between the graves, with Thomas asleep on his chest, and tears dried on his face, and she stopped at the edge of the chapel yard and looked at him a long moment. "You're crying for them," she said. "I never did, not once. Not where anyone could see. I went cold instead. I've been cold for 2 years, and I never once cried for my own children." He looked up at her. "I'm sorry, Abigail. Not for the leaving I've said that I'll say it all my life. For this. For making you grieve them alone. For grieving them alone myself in some Boston room with a glass of whiskey, instead of here with you where we could have held each other up. We should have done this together. A year ago. 2 years ago. We should have sat down right here between them and cried until we couldn't and held on to each other. Instead, we each went off to be strong alone, and being strong alone is what nearly finished us." Abigail crossed the chapel yard and sat down beside him on the ground, careful, and she leaned her head on his shoulder, and the 2 of them sat between the graves of the children they'd lost, with the child they'd kept sleeping between them, and they grieved finally together the way they should have all along. "What did you say to her?" Samuel asked after a while. "Holloway." "What I needed to. She heard it. All of it." Abigail wiped her eyes. "And then she said something I didn't expect. She said—" Her voice caught. "She said that in 30 years of keeping your house, she'd never once seen you cry. Not when your father died. Not when you lost the babies. Not ever. And that she'd helped make you that way. Taught you to swallow everything and go cold because that's how she got through her own life, and it was the only thing she knew to teach. And she said she'd watched you go colder and colder for 30 years, and told herself it was strength. And then she looked at me and said, 'And now you've gone and taught him to weep in a year, girl, what I couldn't unteach him in 30. I hated you for marrying him. I see now I should have thanked you. You did the thing I was too frightened to do. You let him be left and stayed anyway, and that's the only thing that ever could have saved him.'" Abigail shook her head slowly, I came out here to hate her, Samuel. I sat down meaning to. And she handed me that, and now I don't know what I feel, except that she's a wicked old woman who told me the truest thing anyone said about you in 2 years, and I can't hate her clean anymore. And I think that might have been exactly what she meant to do. She's clever that way, Samuel said. She always was. It's how she survived. It's how you both survived. Abigail stood and pulled him up, and the two of them walked back to the house with their son past the cottage, where an old woman's lamp now burned in the window, and it was not forgiveness, not yet, and might never be all the way. But it was a household, and that was more than any of them had had a season ago. The autumn came on, and the honest half of the debt was paid. Pierce delivered the $1,640 to Vane's Richmond office and brought back the discharge, and the land was clear at last. Clear the way Robert Harper had dreamed of and never lived to see. And the deed came in Abigail's name, hers alone, free and clear. Harper Estate, restored to the Harpers forever, and she stood on her own porch holding the paper and cried for her father, who'd carried the debt 11 years, and died still carrying it, and who'd been right all along, that the receipt would matter more than the money someday, and it should have been the end of the trouble. By every law of how such stories go, the wolf was driven off, and the land was saved, and the family was whole, and there should have been nothing left but the slow good work of living. But life is not a story, and it had one more blow to land. It came in November, and it came for Thomas. The boy had always been small-born 3 weeks early, loud but slight, and Pratt had said he'd want watching through his first winter. And in the second week of November, the croup came through the county the way it did every cold season, and it found the small loud boy in the big house, and it laid him low, and for 3 nights Thomas Ashcroft fought for every breath in his mother's arms, while the whole household held its own. It was worse than the birth in its way, because at the birth there'd been something to do, push hold on fight. With the croup, there was nothing to do but keep him warm and keep him breathing, and wait, and waiting was the one thing neither Samuel nor Abigail had ever been any good at. On the second night, when the boy's breath went high and tight and whistling, and his small chest heaved, Abigail broke. She'd held square through everything, through the abandonment, through the birth that nearly killed her, through Vane and Holloway, and the whole long summer. And it was a sick child in the dark in November that finally broke her, the way the small things break the strong ones, when the big things couldn't. She sat in the rocking chair with Thomas struggling against her, and she started to shake, and then she started to keen low, a sound Samuel had never heard from her, and never wanted to hear again. "Not this one," she said. "Not this one too, I can't. Samuel, I can't bury a third. I can't do it, I won't survive it. I told you I wouldn't, and I meant it, not this one. Please, not after all of it, not after I let myself." She was coming apart in the chair, the iron of her finally cracking clean through. "I let myself love him. I let myself love you. I opened the door. You made me open the door, and now this is what happens when I open the door. This is what always happens. I should have kept it shut. I should have stayed the woman from July, who didn't believe in anything. And Samuel did the thing he'd spent his whole life unable to do. He didn't go cold. He didn't go quiet. He didn't leave the room to be strong alone, or arrange his face into something calm and distant. He knelt down in front of the rocking chair, and he put his arms around both of them, his wife and his struggling son, and he held on, and he let her feel him shaking too. "I'm here," he said. "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. I'm right here in the room, and I'm scared out of my mind same as you, and I'm not going to pretend I'm not. We're going to be scared together. That's the difference, Abigail. That's the whole difference between now and before. Before we'd have been scared in separate rooms. Now we're scared in the same one holding the same boy, and that's all I've got to offer you. It's not much. It won't make him breathe easier. But you are not doing this one alone. You did the last 2 alone, and the birth half alone, and I will be damned before I let you do one more hard thing alone as long as I'm alive to be in the room. Cry, shake, come apart. I've got you. I've got you both. And if the worst comes," his voice broke, "if the worst comes, then we grieve him together here in this room, the way we never grieved the others, and it'll be the worst thing that ever happened to us, and we'll do it side by side. But it's not coming. Not tonight. Listen to him. Listen, Abigail. He's loud. He's fighting. The loud ones live, Eleanor said. He's his mother's son, and he doesn't quit, and he doesn't know how to do a thing quietly, including breathe. Listen to him fight. And Abigail listened, and the boy fought. And somewhere in the listening, with her husband's arms around the both of them, and his fear pressed warm against hers, instead of hidden away cold and distant, the keening eased, and she stopped trying to hold the iron up, and she let Samuel hold it up with her. And the two of them held their son together through the worst of the night. Pratt came at dawn the way he'd come the night of the birth, and he listened to the boy's chest a long time, and then he straightened, and the cautious thing came into his face that Abigail had learned to read as hope. "The fever's turning," he said. "Hear that rattle loosening? That's the worst of it breaking up. He's through the corner of it. Keep him warm, keep the steam going, and I'll wager by tomorrow night he's loud enough to wake the dead, and you'll be wishing he'd hush." He packed his bag. "Small, this one, but there's iron in him. Comes by it honest from both sides, near as I can tell." He looked between them, the husband still on his knees by the chair, the wife gray with the long night, the two of them tangled together around the sleeping boy, whose breath was easing at last. "I'll say what I said in August. There's the medicine, and there's the will. And there's the third thing I don't name. This family's got a powerful lot of the third thing. More than its share. See, you don't waste it." When he'd gone, Abigail looked at Samuel, still kneeling, his arms gone numb from holding them all night, and not caring. "You stayed," she said. "All night, on your knees. You didn't go cold, and you didn't leave the room, and you let me see you scared. I told you I would. You told me a great many things." She reached out and touched his face the way she had that first July afternoon. "But this time you did them. That's new. That's the new thing, Samuel. You've stopped telling me who you'll be and started just being him." Her eyes filled, but it was a different kind now, exhausted and overflowing, and almost glad. "I think I forgive you. Not for the leaving. I don't know if I'll ever forgive the leaving all the way, and maybe I shouldn't. Maybe some things you just carry. But for the rest of it, for who you were before. I think somewhere in this terrible night, holding our son and feeling you shake, I forgave the man you used to be, because he's gone. He's truly gone, and the man on his knees in front of me is somebody I—" She stopped. "Somebody you what?" Samuel said softly. "Somebody I love," Abigail Harper said. "There, I've said it. First time since before the second grave. Somebody I love. God help me, after everything, somebody I love." It was the first time either of them had said the word in over a year, and neither of them said anything else for a long while, because there wasn't anything else that needed saying. The winter passed, and Thomas grew loud and strong and fat, and climbed out of his cradle by spring and into everything, and the spring turned to summer a year almost to the day. From the July afternoon, Samuel had walked through the parlor door with separation papers crushed in his fist, and on a morning in that second July, Samuel asked Abigail to walk out to the garden with him. Her mother's old roses, where she'd gone most mornings the summer she carried Thomas, and he had Eleanor and Caleb, and even old Beatrice waiting there, and Pratt and his wife and Mrs. Coffey. The minister's wife who'd brought the bread, and the minister himself, and Abigail stopped at the garden gate when she saw them all and understood, and her hand went to her mouth. "Samuel, what is this?" "2 years ago," Samuel said, taking both her hands, standing in the roses in front of everyone who'd held them up through the worst year of their lives. "Your father gave you to me, and I married you because it was the proper thing and the honorable thing, and because a dying man asked me to keep his girl safe. I married you out of duty, Abigail. I'll not pretend otherwise. You were there, you know it's true. I stood up in front of God and I made vows. I meant the way a man means a contract, carefully, coldly, with the terms all laid out. And then I kept those vows the way I keep a ledger by the letter, and not the spirit. And I nearly destroyed us both doing it, because a marriage kept like a contract is no marriage at all." His voice was steady and clear and carried to everyone in the garden. "So I'm asking your leave to do it over, properly, the way it should have been done. Not because your father asked me, not because it's honorable or proper or expected. Not out of duty, not out of guilt, not to fix what I broke." He went down on one knee in the roses. "I'm asking you to marry me, Abigail Harper, because I love you. Because somewhere in the worst year of my life you taught a cold man to weep and a frightened man to stay, and a man who left every room before the hard thing got said to kneel down in the middle of one and say it. I choose you, not the contract, not the duty, you. With my whole heart, what's left of it that you didn't have to rebuild yourself, marry me again. This time for the only reason that was ever worth a damn." Abigail Harper looked down at her husband kneeling in her mother's roses, a year and a lifetime from the man who'd come to leave her, and the whole garden held its breath. "You understand," she said, and her voice shook, and she let it, "that I buried you in the chapel yard, between our babies. I held a funeral for you in my own heart, and I came back to the house a widow. You understand that the woman you're proposing to is a woman who learned to live without you on purpose, who built walls you can still see the foundations of, who's going to spend the rest of her life flinching just a little every time you ride off down that road, because some things you carry even after you forgive them." She drew a breath. "You're not proposing to the girl my father gave you. She's gone too, same as the cold man you used to be. You're proposing to a harder woman who's been left and lived, and that woman doesn't say yes easy, and she doesn't say yes because the garden's pretty and everyone's watching." "I know," Samuel said. "I'm not asking the girl, I'm asking the woman, the hard one, the one who lived. She's the one I love. The girl I married out of duty, the woman I'd marry out of nothing in the world but wanting to." And Abigail Harper, who had been rejected and abandoned and buried alive and brought back, who had reclaimed her father's land and her own agency, and a love she'd sworn she'd never risk again, looked at the man who'd learned too late, and just in time, how to stay in the room, and she gave him her answer. "Then yes," she said. "Yes, Samuel Ashcroft. I'll marry you again. Not the girl's yes, the woman's. The one that comes with all the scars and the flinching and the funeral I held and the door I swore I'd never open. Yes, with all of it. Yes, because you stayed. Yes, because you wept for our babies and held our son through the croup and knelt down in a Boston parlor and refused to leave the room. Yes, because you're not the man my father gave me. You're the man I'd have chosen if anyone had ever thought to ask me what I'd choose." She pulled him up out of the roses and into her arms. "I choose you. Do you hear me? After everything, with my eyes wide open and my walls half standing and no illusions left in me anywhere, I choose you. That's the yes. That's the only yes that was ever worth giving." And in the garden of her mother's roses, with their son laughing in Eleanor's arms, and an old woman who'd wronged them, weeping, quiet, grateful tears, and the whole small world that had held them up, gathered round Samuel. Ashcroft married Abigail Harper a second time. Not the marriage of a contract or a duty or a dying man's last wish, but the marriage of two people who had been given every reason to leave each other and had learned the hard way through the longest year of their lives, the one thing that holds a family together when love alone runs thin. Not the perfect promise, not the grand gesture, but the daily stubborn, unglamorous choice to stay in the room, to speak the true thing, to grieve together instead of apart, and to keep choosing each other every single morning, no matter what the morning brings. And they did, every morning, for the rest of their lives. And that in the end is the only thing that ever saves anyone.